My guest today is Dr. Shilpi Bhattacharya. She is a professor at Jindal Global Law School, where she teaches and researches competition law and digital markets. Before this, she worked at a law firm in Singapore and holds a PhD in competition law. Shilpi is one of India's leading voices speaking out about the risks of monopolies and the importance of competition regulation. Since starting this podcast, I've really wanted to discuss monopolies with somebody and couldn't have asked for a better guest to do this with. I hope you enjoy this conversation.
Hi Shilpi, welcome to the podcast.
Hi Deepak, it's great to be here and it's wonderful to talk about monopolies.
Yes, I am super excited about this topic in specific because there's also a little bit of skin in the game. I have been an entrepreneur, I am an entrepreneur, and so there is some amount of meaningful thinking that I've done privately on what it means to operate as a capitalist in India or in the world. Before we dive into the monopoly question, who is Shilpi and why do you care about this subject?
Okay, so I think it's kind of evolved over a period of time. So when I went to do my PhD in competition law, I went in the year 2012, and it was a time when I think big tech was sort of in ascendance and they were growing, and part of my PhD research was doing sort of looking at Facebook's acquisition of WhatsApp, which at that time in 2014, in my gut I felt this was problematic, but no one else was, because all the competition authorities said this is great, like there's no competition issue here, and I was thinking, I mean, it seems like there's going to be reduced competition. And then I had another chapter of my PhD where I was working on Amazon and predatory pricing. And I wrote something, and actually my thesis was on examining sort of the economic assumptions that underlay competition law. So specifically the assumption of rationality, that our business is rational. So from the business side, because obviously consumer side there's been more literature, but I was looking at it from the business side, and my argument was that businesses are not always rational, and that needs to play out in the way that we look at competition law. And I was looking at that in the context of Amazon and Amazon's pricing strategies, whether they are predatory or not. So predatory pricing is basically a form of pricing where a business will drive down prices to below cost in order to drive competitors out of the market, with the thinking that once competitors are out, they can exploit that position. And I felt that that's what Amazon was doing. And when I brought that thinking to my supervisor, he said, you cannot write this in your thesis because it goes against the normative framework of competition law, which is based on what is called a consumer welfare standard. And the consumer welfare standard measures whether competition law should be used as a tool of enforcement based on how consumers are going to be impacted, specifically on price, because surplus is easier to measure.
Right.
So when prices are being driven down by Amazon, that's a good thing.
Yes.
And so you can't say that this is bad within that normative framework, and you can't change that normative framework, so you can't make this argument. And then Lina Khan makes that argument, and she becomes really famous. I was quite upset that I was not allowed to be the next Lina Khan. No, I'm joking. But that troubled me, that I'm not allowed to sort of think about competition law in certain ways. And I found that I had already thought about this, that's why my PhD was on this, that there is a dogma to the economic theory that underpins competition law, and it's serving certain ends, which is that it reduces enforcement, particularly where you see that there are very powerful players in the market. So that kind of got me interested in the ends of competition law, and I realized during my PhD, and honestly I don't think I really understood competition law before that, while talking to my supervisor, how much of a political enterprise this is. It's very much ideological, and it's driven by ideologies, because if you don't agree with the dominant normative paradigm, you can't make an argument. It's just wrong, which to me seemed very narrow. So I then realized that this is very much about sort of taking a position where you don't really want enforcement of competition law. And you have to follow that. And if you don't follow that, your papers don't get accepted, your thesis will not get accepted. And so it was quite a complicated kind of structure to navigate. And from there, we are now living in a world where that kind of thinking has been questioned. And there's a lot of thinking now on both ends of the spectrum. So I've seen how sort of these kind of economic the economic theory, the new classical economic theory, has kind of been questioned, and how sort of the thinking around competition has changed because of the rise of big tech. I think the rise of big tech has a very important role to play in this. So that's kind of what got me interested in sort of the capitalism issue.
Got it. And if you can help me understand, so you said the traditional thinking was, as long as prices are not being driven upwards to exploit consumers, this is not really a concern. The lack of competition in some sort of a space is not a concern. What is that new way of thinking? Like, what has changed? If it's not price, what is the variable that we think is the key consideration for deciding if something is problematic? And then the larger question, what is a monopoly? I mean, if we're able to define this word, that this business is a monopoly, and then I'm assuming that variable will be the boundary condition at which monopoly becomes problematic. So what is a monopoly, and then what are these new variables beyond price that we are looking at to say, okay, now this is a problematic monopoly?
So on the first part of that, so on sort of the people like Lina Khan, and I espouse their views, have argued that sort of in digital markets like Amazon, where the business is operating across multiple markets, you can cross-subsidize. So you can drive down prices in one market and kind of make up for it across markets, especially with advertising. So advertising is a source of revenue. So they're saying that it's not so simple that you have to show the ability to recover your losses in that market, because if the business is able to do it in another market, then they're still able to, right? They're still making money. And the entire paradigm has now changed in that the way that people are doing business is now about growth primarily, right? And then you make money through other ways once you have that kind of consumer base. So the thinking of how business is done in traditional versus the digital markets that we're seeing is also different. So we need to change the way we've traditionally been thinking about what is anti-competitive behavior to tailor to the new markets. But of course, the law hasn't changed. But the way of doing business has changed. So shouldn't the law think about it differently? So that's been some of the change in thinking. But to be honest, predatory pricing is still not being enforced, I think, anywhere, even in India, in digital markets and in other markets as well. There's very limited enforcement because of these technicalities. It's hard to kind of establish. So, and it was also a lot of the technicalities came into the law through this kind of pushing of like, it's only problematic if you can show the ability to make like a lot of money after you've engaged in the predatory pricing campaign and you've succeeded. You have to be able to show that there's going to be like money ahead. Those requirements were built into the law by economists, and those are very hard to establish. So it ends up being that there's very little enforcement and very few cases are brought up. And on the monopoly point, which was your second question, so a monopoly is obviously, the classical definition is that it is a single seller in a market.
Yeah.
But I think for the purpose of our discussion today, I would say my concern is not just with single sellers in a market. My concern is with the entrenchment of power by players in a market, not just in a market, but across multiple markets. When that happens, that's a cause for concern. So that is my concern with monopolies.
Got it. And to paraphrase the first point that you made, just so I understand getting it correctly, you're saying something like traditionally businesses would make a product or sell a service, and their margins would be baked into that product or service. That's predominantly what they would do as a business. Versus, take Amazon as an example, where they're an e-commerce platform trying to deliver goods to consumers at dirt cheap prices, as low as they can possibly go. And they're comfortable sustaining a loss in that business because they're able to, for example, build AWS in parallel or some other business in parallel, a secondary business that is a consequence of the distribution that they have built. So they've grown that large on low prices, using that distribution, building a secondary or tertiary business. Sometimes this business leverages data, so consumer data, but could be adjacent as well. And then are able to consistently keep prices low in that first business while profiting off business 2, business 3. And this is a way of doing business that has traditionally not been seen pre-digital businesses. Am I, categorizing this well? Is that like the is that how these monopolies are created and survive and never drive up prices, but are still a monopoly? Something like that?
More or less correct. So I think some of these business practices definitely are not new, but just the scale at which it's happening and how the market supports these kind of, the economics of it just kind of exacerbates it in digital markets.
Got it, understood. And for listeners, any other words that you think we have to define? So in my mind, for example, a market is a place where buyers and sellers interact. Sellers have things that they want to sell, buyers have things that they want to buy. There is some place where the supply curve meets the demand curve. That place decides price. So we know what the seller will sell that product at and what the buyer will buy that product at. And this is typically how a market functions. And to me, this is a free market. A free market is one where you have voluntary contracts by buyers and sellers who engage in this market of their own volition, shake hands on the price of a good or service because both parties are comfortable with that price, that's what they want to retail at, and then a transaction takes place. So broadly, are we on the same page on this is what a market is, or traditionally, even from a neoclassical economic sense, this is how we've looked at markets, I think, forever.
Correct. So to me, market is an institutional mechanism that helps to decide many important economic questions. So not just price, I think sort of what we should produce, how we should produce, for whom we should produce, so etc. Right? All the important economic questions can be decided in a quote-unquote efficient way through a well-functioning / healthy market. To me, that's the idea of a market.
Got it. And competition means that there are more than one seller for a type of good or service. I mean, approximately similar goods or services, there's more than one seller.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I thought it would just be useful to get these words out there so that listeners also have a sense of, okay, we're going to be going deep on each of these.
So just to quickly go back, so I said it's not just about price, it's also about giving consumers what they want, not just in terms of price, right? So consumers feel that this is entrepreneurship, right? So there's a demand for something which is not getting supplied. The market mechanism will work towards providing that, right? There is, say, something that is getting overproduced, the market mechanism will kind of work that out and the supply of that will come down. So it's not just about price. It's also about quantity. It's also about what is getting sold. It's also about how much of who you're selling to. So if there's a underserved consumer group, the market mechanism can solve those problems as well.
Got it, understood. And in a previous answer, you said something like, and this is how markets function well. How do we know if a market ceases to function well? Like, what is a good cue that this is a market that is no longer functioning, quote unquote, appropriately or properly? So,
measured by outcomes, right? So, essentially, when a market is functioning well, in my mind, I'm thinking consumers are happy because as a consumer, you're getting choices. If you're not happy with the service or the price of one particular seller, you can go to another seller and you can get a better deal. That always makes me happy as a consumer. And from the seller's perspective, they are being incentivized to give consumers what they want. So the process of rivalry is pushing them. The profit maximizing objective is kind of pushing them to give consumers what they want. So consumers should be able to get what they want. And for me, that's a well-functioning market. If you're, as a consumer, left thinking, okay, like this business really treated me badly or really charged a high price or didn't bother to resolve my, product quality issue, etc. That's a sign that the market is not healthy for me, in my mind.
Yeah, but you've laid out the neoclassical definition. because by that rationale, there are very few consumers who order off Amazon, receive a product within 24 hours and say, oh, I hated that experience. A business like Amazon has been built fundamentally on the happiness of consumers who cannot believe that a product can arrive in 24 hours without them paying too much more than they would normally pay, and no hassle. So where did the definition break? Like if consumers are getting what they want, there must be some other variable that we're looking at and saying this is still problematic because, and it could be what you mentioned earlier, which is that Amazon continues to subsidize this business because of other businesses, that they are building. Is that predominantly it? Because I feel on the consumer front, they're doing like a bang on job.
Yeah, so I actually agree with you. They are doing a great job. But I think, so the problem comes when there's no choice, right? So essentially, on Amazon, of course, there are like multiple issues on the seller front. I think we discussed that earlier.
Yeah.
Which is that if Amazon wants, it can increase commissions. It has increased commissions. The whole buy box issue, which is that, Amazon gets to decide which seller gets put on the buy box. And if you're not on Amazon's buy box, you basically will not be able to sell effectively. So on the seller side, there are multiple issues with the power that Amazon holds in this market. Amazon sort of, that buy box determination is also very biased, right? So you have to like agree to use all of Amazon services, etc., to be in that buy box. So on the seller side, there are multiple issues. Also on the buyer side, right? So there are times when you might want to buy something from somewhere else and you just can't, because everyone is selling on Amazon, especially books now, right? So I might want to buy a book from somewhere else, and sometimes the books on Amazon are expensive and I don't have that choice. So the absence of choice, I think, on both the buyer and seller side of the market is problematic. And we can come to the other problems, which sort of the deeper problems with monopolies later, I think.
Got it, understood. Then maybe it will help to like take an example of not Amazon, because Amazon is a two-sided marketplace. So they have to serve both buyers and sellers. And then that's a nuanced conversation about how they negotiate with buyers with sellers to be able to deliver for buyers, because that's who ultimately it feels like they're solving for, something like that. I went to the passport office in Hyderabad like a year and a half ago. And as I reached the passport office, I had my phone with me. And obviously, I'm staying at a hotel nearby. I'm not leaving my phone there because I have to take an Uber back and forth to the passport office. But the US Embassy does not allow... there's a visa office. I'm applying for a visa to go to the US. They don't allow phones inside their building. So the question immediately arises, what do I do with my phone? I have an appointment at 9:30 and I have a phone with me. I have to do something with this phone. So I asked the guard, what do people typically do? And he says, just down there, there's like a little hotel. So it's like a 2-minute walk away. It's the nearest building to the US Embassy by total coincidence. It's not like the person who built that hotel there knew that an embassy would pop up nearby. And he has built like a small locker service. And so you can go and hand over your phone and he'll keep the phone in the locker for an hour or something, right? And he was charging some 750 rupees, if I'm not wrong, for like the hour. And it was the only option that was available on the table, right? Like this is the only person who is solving this problem for me. And it's possibly because there's also the aspect of me having some privilege that I can spend 750 rupees because the visa is important to me and I don't want to miss the appointment. That I didn't mind this transaction. In fact, in my mind, I was really happy that he existed, because what would I have done to my phone if not for this person? Because the US Embassy is not incentivized to solve this problem for me. I need a visa. They don't need to give me one. And so they're not going to set up a process for me to be able to deposit a phone. But I would still think that to most people outside looking in, this is problematic. This feels like a quote-unquote unfair price for
unfair.
holding a phone for an hour.
Yes.
Nonetheless, this is where supply is met demand. That person would not be running this business if it was not feasible for people to pay 750. So clearly, we're comfortable enough coughing up that 750, despite being annoyed about the fact that we have to pay this amount, because the appointment for that visa is so hard to get that it's worth 750 rupees, right? In this whole setup.
Yeah.
Now, putting on your antitrust hat, right? Is this one of those circumstances that you feel is a monopolized business? There's no way to compete because it is the closest building. There's no way to get a new building closer to this, and so harder to build a competing locker service. And I couldn't really think, as I was standing in the queue, of a way out of this being the only solution to this problem, and that person being allowed to dictate price. But of course, he couldn't charge 10,000 because at that point, I'd book an Uber back and drop my phone and then come back because that additional hassle is worth it. I'll pause here, but is this like a good enough example that's not as complex as an Amazon case, but for us to just understand what the problem is with a monopoly type setup in your mind?
Correct. So I think if there were other places, locker rental places that could have cropped up, this person would not have been able to charge 750, right? The market mechanism would have created price competition and the price would have come down. So that's exactly competition, the market mechanism working to deliver better to consumers, which is not happening here because of that position that this person has in terms of property space.
Yeah. And I'm wondering, you're right, of course. If there were more buildings in the area, then it would be 100 rupees for an hour. That quote unquote feels more fair to me because that's something I'd be willing to pay for an hour, somebody holding my phone. But the fact is that there aren't any other buildings in the area. I don't think I want the state stepping in and regulating this and saying, no, we want to build more hotels in the space just so that there are lockers available. We can't regulate the embassy to do something they don't want to do, which is deal with this additional hassle of having mobile phones and the overhead that comes with that. And in this transaction, there are two simple choices. Either my visa appointment is worth 70 rupees or it's not, right? That's the question that I am asking myself as a buyer, and I'm deciding that it totally is. So if we think about a voluntary marketplace as a collection of win-win transactions, double thank you moments, then this is, in my mind, a double thank you moment, because I'm saying, what the hell do I do with my phone? And this person says, I'll hold on to it for 750, and I'm doing the math and saying, yes, this 750 is worth less to me than the cost of missing out on the appointment that I've made a month ago. And so that is a double thank you moment. That is, greater than the sum of its parts. I can resonate with your instinctive reaction. It was mine as well, that like this is just, I'm coughing up money for nothing. It's just a box. But ultimately, it's a well thought out solution for a meaningful problem that people attending the embassy have had. And he's charging a price that by and large people are willing to pay. Is this truly a problem? I'm contesting the fact itself that this is a problem. I'm saying that this is actually perfectly fine. It's expensive and it feels like troublesome because he has like an unfair advantage given the place. But that aside, he's solving a meaningful problem at a price point that people are willing to pay. And then second, that it is unsolvable. I can't even think of a way that we could address this and quote unquote solve it, unless of course the state intervenes and says something like, this locker business, I'm going to get into this and put a bunch of bureaucrats on top of this and say, let's solve this so that it is more egalitarian than it is right now. But yeah, handing this back to you, right? I thought this was a good example to just see how you would approach this.
Yeah, so firstly, as a competition law person, so would competition law be able to address this? I seriously doubt it, because it doesn't really go into excessive pricing that much. So yes, in Indian competition law, you can look at excessive pricing, but only when it's very, very excessive. So this does not seem like very, very excessive. So I would say it falls outside the realm of competition law, because competition law is not an instrument of price regulation. So it's not going to get into it, even if a monopoly is doing this. So that's one part of this. I feel that yes, I agree with you, it is an efficiency enhancing mechanism, right? But not, like you're saying, not everyone can afford it. So it is also while it is efficiency enhancing, there will be a number of people who may not be able to afford that price and therefore cannot take advantage of that. So overall, I think if we expand like what we're looking at in terms of consumer welfare, it isn't the best outcome for everyone.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not the best outcome for society as a whole. Now, what can we do about that? I think in that situation, the cost of regulation, because it's not such a big issue, and maybe the kind of people who are going there are generally the kind of people who can afford it, and it's not in that sense something that a lot of people are consuming. So maybe just regulating that one thing would be too costly and it doesn't make sense. So I agree with you that what can we do to address it? I think the best thing would be if the market mechanism worked and people came up with creative ideas about how to, say, movable locker spaces or other things.
Absolutely, yeah. That's exactly what I had in mind as well. A movable locker space, like a dude standing outside saying, I have 20 lockers that I'm carrying around with me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Except I have to trust him not to run away because it is a movable locker. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure that could be built by the fact that he's been there for the last 5 years and continues to stand there.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think that's also why competition law doesn't address, because it's hard to, in most excessive pricing cases, although I personally am like, I boil at the thought of excessive pricing because
Yeah.
it does create inequality. And that inequality generally ends up being inefficient because that money, I think, would have been more valuable in the hands of a poorer person than someone who already has so much of money. So I think for me, like, inequality is a big issue, and if competition enforcement can reduce it, that's like great. I'm very pro that. So, but competition law doesn't really get into it because it's hard to measure value. So unless it's very clear that this is way above value what you're charging, where it doesn't get into it, and that I think goes to your point of like,
Yeah. And for me, I've thought about this often, and especially in preparing for us speaking, because I feel like this example is similar to how somebody who takes a pro-monopoly position, like is generally okay with monopolies existing, is not very concerned with the emergence of monopolies, would look at it exactly like this, where the other example that we were speaking about just before we started recording was that we both have a mutual friend who swims and has earphones that are waterproof that she can wear when she goes swimming. There's like one company in the whole world that makes this, and they charge an exorbitant fee for these earphones, but it's a really small market. I mean, people who swim are a very small subset of all human beings, and people who want to listen to music when they swim are an even smaller subset. And if you want that so much, then you should be willing to, pay this fee, and if you're not, it's not the end of the world, something like that, right? And so these companies charge whatever they want. They have virtually no competition, and I can't instinctively figure out why this is an issue. Like it's in this case, in the example of waterproof earphones for somebody who's swimming in a pool, isn't it just perfectly fine that there is no other company and this company sets whatever price they want? And I feel like even the claim of whatever price they want is not really true. They will try and price it at the highest number possible that still allows them for them to make a meaningful business, which is what most businesses do. They try and push up price to such an extent that beyond that, it is not possible to run a business anymore, right? All
Correct.
companies tend
Correct.
to treat prices like this.
Correct.
So then what I'm hearing back is something like, it's not the monopolization of an industry itself is problematic. Like there could be, let's say, niche businesses, smaller businesses, some parts of some markets that are monopolized because there's only a single company building for that, only a single locker room, only a single company building waterproof earphones, and that's okay.
Yeah, so I mean, on the locker room, just going back to the locker room example as well, and we can address the earphone example in a bit. So yeah, I think essentially you have to find other ways to make that market more competitive. So maybe reduce barriers to entry into that market. Like, the government doesn't have to regulate to solve the problem.
Right.
It can find other market mechanisms. I think we'll talk about this when we talk about, say, ONDC and other things, right? Reduce barriers to entry, encourage sort of people to do other things, right? Or maybe like open up spaces where this can happen. So there are other ways of solving that problem, which we agree is a problem, but it's just not a big enough problem. So I think that's also what I started with saying. It's not just all monopolies that are problematic, right? It's the really entrenched ones that have sort of power across multiple markets that really exert an influence, which is not your locker room guy. To me, that's problematic, right? And so an inherent way of doing business, now coming to the
waterproof
earphone example, is, I mean, product differentiation is a very common way of doing business. And product differentiation, economics tells us, gives you market power and it gives you power to raise prices, right? So, I mean, that's happening inherently, and they're doing that. In itself, it's not problematic to me. If you're creating a better product, you're giving consumers something that they want that they don't otherwise get, and you're not exploiting that position other than sort of making your money, right? So in a differentiated market, if you're giving something to consumers that they value and they want and they're willing to pay for, because you do have other options of, say, non-waterproof
earphones, which would never work if you had to go swimming.
Which would not work in that swimming context.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I would care less about that in the overall scheme of things, because it's the scale of the power that matters to me. And this one company just producing this one thing doesn't matter to me so much. It's not such a matter of concern.
Got it. I'm still trying to just arrive at what parts of the monopolization of a market are things that we want to point at and say this is a problematic, right? On the price question, as part of me disagreeing with you, my submission is that there is no such thing as an unfair price. It doesn't exist. There is only the price that somebody is willing to pay or not pay because it is a quote-unquote free market. It may so be that there is only a single buyer or a single seller. You could have a monopoly or a monopsony. But even in that instance, the price that is agreed upon is a fair price. You have parties who are doing the math and then coming to the conclusion that I'm willing to pay this because it is worth more than the alternative. That alternative could be starvation. It could be me not having a phone locker, or what do I do with this phone? I have to lose the entire phone in that case. It could be any of those other alternatives. But still, the alternative that the entrepreneur provides is better. And by function of it being better, the choice is that, yes, I have subverted a worse outcome for myself by choosing, quote unquote, a better outcome for myself. And the entrepreneur, I'm presuming, is not complicit in creating that worse alternative. They have not created starvation, for example. They've only created jobs that employees can say yes or no to, or products that consumers can say yes or no to. And so in that way, it's through that lens, it is hard to argue that there is such a thing as an unfair price. So I know you feel otherwise, right? Like you feel like charging 5,000 rupees to a phone is just ludicrous.
Yeah.
But how do we decide that? How do we know when, like, in fact, I resonate with that icky feeling. There are times when I have to make a transaction, I'm like, this is just too expensive for me, right? And I rationalize myself into understanding why this is the price and why I'm okay paying it. But the gut feel is always like, this is just way too much or whatever. What is it, again, from like a lawyer lens or generally from a competition lens, how do we know when a price is unfair?
So to me, just very instinctively, I feel a price is unfair when I have to pay it just because there are no other options, and the lack of options is because of lack of competition in the market, which could have changed if there was a more competitive market. To me, that seems like problematic, right? So, I mean, think of an employee, since we were talking about monopsony, right? Think of an employee who has to agree to certain conditions of employment just because there are no other employers.
Yeah.
And think of a market where your services are so much in demand that everyone wants you. Will you really be agreeing to that same set of conditions? No, you'll be in the position where you can bargain. So it's that, to me, that is a market that's not functioning well, the monopsony situation, and therefore the outcomes are worse. The outcomes are worse, right? And that's because the market isn't functioning well. So to me, that's the, I don't know if that addresses what...
Yes, I mean, in the example that you gave, I feel like a sentence is incomplete. The outcomes are worse for the employees.
Yes.
Right? But they're great for the employer in this case. Because the employer is getting all of the terms and conditions that they want signed off.
Correct, yes.
But the new liberal argument for something like this would just be that, true, yeah, I mean, there have been, for example, mining towns in the US where the entire town just has a single employer, right? The person who runs the mine, and so miners live horrible lives as a consequence.
Sorry, just going back to that previous thing, I just thought about this. But in a competitive market, I think overall the outcomes would be better for everyone. The employer would be happy, the employee. So overall,
yes,
outcomes would be better for everyone.
You and I are on the same page on this, and you and I then agree with the neoliberal types. Because their position is something like, even when these things do arise, which is you have monopolized markets, the incentives for competition kick in very quickly, because every other entrepreneur who has capital and wants to get into business will look at this market and say, if only I could get a slice of this, it's very lucrative for me, because the only other competition is this other monopolized player, and they're somebody who is generally quite inefficient. Since they've not had the pressures of competition, they're operating inefficiently. If I get a foot into the market, that's all it takes, and I should be able to do a great job competing with them. I'm willing to offer 10% more on salaries than I get access to their employees, right? I'm willing to fight legal cases on behalf of the employees if they so have terms that I feel are discriminatory, whatever it is, right? So then the second question to this is trying to answer something like, how did that original monopoly arise? Or why is it so hard for new entrants to enter these markets? And the neoliberal submission would be that it is not. in a truly free market, devoid of the interference of the evil state, you have entrepreneurs gifted the infinite opportunity to enter these markets in all types of adjacent ways. Like the way to kill Amazon is to build Zepto. Right? Now, somebody who builds a new Amazon is not likely to topple Amazon because Amazon's just won the efficiency business when it comes to e-commerce. But they will lose for sure in quick commerce simply because Zepto will outcompete them.
Correct.
And it's possible that a Blinkit, a Zepto, any of these new quick commerce types in India will be unwilling to sell to Amazon because they know in 20 years they will have a market cap that is 5 times that of Amazon. And so even the offer of being acquired, bought out for a couple $1 billion may not be consented to so easily. So in your example, I know WhatsApp sold to Facebook, but Snapchat never did. There are ways for entrepreneurs to be so decided in their business that they will not sell because they know that this is a large business standalone. And in those cases, the free market wins. So yeah, we have the misfortune of having a monopoly, but instantly the incentives arise for entrepreneurs to go and solve this. And so they will step in and try and solve it. The only way that this cannot take place is if the state has intervened in some way. That is, if the state has guarded off resources and said, you know what, like this uranium mine is just yours and nobody else can, or they have a license, Raj, only you can manufacture cars or only you can do telecom services, whatever. And sans the state, the neoliberal type would argue that we actually don't have a monopsony problem. They do arise in small pockets, but given the efficiency of the market, they solve for themselves. So this is probably then a case for no regulation, no interference from the state. Now, in this, what am I missing? Like, where does the market, where's the neoliberal wrong? Where does the market break?
Okay, so a lot of things to unpack.
Of course.
And I think you can kind of step in and tell me if I'm wrong here because you're the entrepreneur. So think digital, right?
Yeah.
Google, Facebook, Meta, Amazon, etc. No regulation, right? Even Uber, etc. operating outside any kind of regulation and becoming monopolies, right? So monopolies can arise entirely in the absence of regulation as well, right? And there was a conscious effort not to regulate them, right? So hundreds of acquisitions not stopped, right? So, hundreds of things that could have been considered problematic and enforced through competition are not done. Because overall the feeling was these are innovative businesses, these are providing benefits to consumers. We don't want to chill whatever good things are going on. But that resulted in the creation of monopolies. So that's my counter. You tell me, are you convinced by that?
The taxi cab business that preceded Uber is probably the monopoly, to be honest. It was not a competitive landscape. Prices were fixed by a taxi cab union. Same is true in India as well. I remember I was studying in Chennai when Uber entered India for the first time. And you would have auto drivers throw stones at Uber cabs. Just sort of saying you shouldn't enter this space because we have fought for these, meters and these prices and all of that. And that is fundamentally anti-competitive behavior because, there is no way for me to bargain below a meter.
You also can't bargain with the Uber.
Yes. So with an Uber, I would think of it like this. So first, the competitive landscape does exist. Like my example in the Indian landscape, I know of the US landscape, but not very intimately, is Ola is a decent competitor to Uber.
Correct.
But I've been shocked by the rise of Rapido. Rapido's done really well. I mean, they started later. They were really smart about hopping on two-wheeler cabs first. Then they got hit by regulation because you don't have yellow plates on two-wheelers. So lots of governments, including, for example, the Maharashtra government said this is not even allowed. Then they had to pivot to auto rickshaws and then move to... I'm not talking about Namayatri because Namayatri is like a slightly stranger model where there's a little bit of the ONDC play involved. But Rapido was a true competitor that rose post-Ola, post-Uber. And we do have 3 meaningful competing parties. I mean, yesterday from the airport to Gurgaon, I took my cab from a Rapido because the prices were just lower than Uber. And then second, that you have the ability to have dynamic pricing. So Uber unlocked something that the older folks didn't, in that night prices were just different than day prices. And this is great for cab drivers because driving at night should be more expensive. I mean, the consumer should pay more than driving during the day. And otherwise you had either flat prices or you had this 10 p.m. Like 10 p.m. ke baad it is a different price and then 6 a.m. ke baad it's a different price. And it's not really dynamic. Even things like waiting, for example, like if I have to pause somewhere or to change my route, those are all things that suddenly pop up. Drivers are happier. consumers are happier, I think, on Uber. So I don't know if it's a monopoly. More like it has disrupted a monopoly, which is a unionized, state-backed monopoly that used to exist. It has lowered prices for consumers and given them more options. Like a single app now allows me to do a car with AC, an auto, all these things that I couldn't do before. And it comes to my doorstep. It knows exactly where my address is. We've exchanged phone numbers beforehand, safety features, all of that sort of bundled at very similar prices to what I used to pay before, and other competing options. Like, unfortunately, when I go to Goa, I can't use it because like the Kali Pili is the only way to do it. Right? There is no Uber. So those are examples in my mind of monopolies. And then where a Rapido can rise in a private market and beat Uber and beat Ola, I think Rapido is the second biggest player now. They've beaten Ola already, if I'm not wrong. Is a free market, right? Despite all the flaws that the Indian market has. So would that be one way to counter this?
I agree with you mostly, but I think it doesn't counter the Google, Facebook, Amazon examples, right? Like those are monopolies. And they have existed in the absence of regulation. I agree, but with you on the Uber part, I think that's one of the markets which I feel is kind of competitive. You do see drivers who are very unhappy on Ola and Uber, and Rapido kind of solved for that, and that's how it kind of entered the market, right?
Yes.
To address that discontent, and so basically Ola, Uber were trying to exert some kind of power in that market, and there was kind of a entry to address that. But we don't see that in the Google markets. We don't see that in the Facebook. Is again a more nuanced market, but some of the Facebook markets, we don't see that to that extent with Apple, with Microsoft. I mean, the Microsoft operating system has existed since how long? And it's still such a powerful player in the market, right? It's not been overthrown. It's still there. It's still very significant. Same with Google. So these operating system markets, you can see like the whole idea that monopolies can be disrupted. If they can be disrupted after 40 years, that's not the point, right? They need to be disrupted within a reasonable time frame. Eventually, everything dies. But competition is not working there.
Right. How do you feel, as an aside, I mean, I want to address this question for Google and Facebook, but there is this tension between standardization. So, like the EU will come out and say all phones must have USB Type-C, right? Standard product. And highly competitive space where nothing is standardized. So, if I buy your phone, then I also have to buy a connector that you retail, right? Because you have your own standards on how your parts are manufactured, and I have to buy into your ecosystem. And the reason I ask this is because this tension exists with hardware. Like the Apple example, this is true, where Apple has their own ecosystem of hardware things. It doesn't play well with anybody else's ecosystems. And I know regulators have a problem with this.
Yes.
But then if you think about like Google or Facebook or any of these, they have heavy standardization. So, for example, the default way for us to message in India is just to use WhatsApp, right? That it's a standardized product, by and large. But here, the regulator does not want this. The regulator's problem is that this is too standardized. We don't want everybody on the same messaging platform. We'd like for there to be a wide availability of messaging platforms so that we can message across. And this feels like contrarian to me. Because on one side, people are choosing to all be on the same platform because it is convenience. It's so odd for me to have like 5 different messaging apps and have to deal with different conversations on different messaging apps. So, of course, like one winner wins. Versus, I want to choose to use a lightning port, but I'm not allowed to because the state says, no, here we want to standardize. And I don't know if I'm phrasing the question well, but how do we know where we want the regulator to step in and say we want to standardize whatever this is, like a messaging platform or a piece of hardware, versus where we want the regulator to step in and say we don't want standardization. We want this to be a fragmented, competitive market.
Okay, so on the WhatsApp example, right? So as a consumer, what would I want? I would want that if I don't like WhatsApp, I don't like that it can share my messages with the government if it wants to, etc. And I want to use a more privacy-centric messaging app, but no one else is really providing that because really the network effects for WhatsApp are so strong. And so I don't get that option. If the state is able to create an infrastructure, create an environment where other sort of messaging platforms can survive alongside WhatsApp, say by mandating interoperability, then I can at least have that choice, which right now the market is not giving it to me. So for me, that's like on the messaging app situation, because I think all of these discussions, I think we can't really have them very genuine. I think it is good to have them more in a specific
cases.
market context. On the sort of USB cable thing, I feel that I wouldn't say that the regulator should step in to standardize just like that. But when a player has that kind of position in the market that Apple has, and it's using it to just entrench itself and to stop giving consumers the benefit of competition just because you want one Apple product, you have to like buy multiple other Apple products, where there could be other sellers giving much better products, right? So, but you have to buy this because of this ecosystem they are creating. To me, again, consumers are not getting the benefit of competition there. So I think then the state is just stepping in to give an opportunity to other sellers to compete in those other spaces.
Understood. Maybe one way to think about how the consumer is benefiting from this sort of a setup is to say something like, it's possible that Apple's earphones or watch or whatever, some accessory, is not the very best in the world. There could be a Samsung watch that is better than the Apple Watch standalone, right? But because Apple has this process of unifying all their products, it's an ecosystem. So if you come in with an iPhone, then you are better off having an Apple Watch or an Apple earphone or whatever. So it really helps Apple from a business lens. That is, they make quite a bit of money, which means the ultimate primary product, like let's say the iPhone, is significantly better than any other phone I use. I mean, I'm hypothesizing. I love using Androids, but I'm saying, for example, for some consumers, they will say that having a standard iPhone is like the very best thing in the whole world, right? And the trade-off in their mind is, sure, I will take a 10% less premium, less well-working, whatever earphone pair. But instead, the trade-off is because this company is making quite a bit of money as a consequence of me buying into the ecosystem. The phones get so much better. In all of this, my view is these are all just still private party voluntary contracts. I mean, for somebody purchasing an iPhone, they're quite well aware that the Apple ecosystem exists. The green bubble, blue bubble play exists. The earphones are these and the watch is this or whatever. And that I have to use a lightning port for the rest of my life. Like, those are all things that they're quite aware of walking into this. Could always choose to pick up an Android product, but are not, because they're saying the phone is damn good. I love an iPhone. It's actually significantly better than the Android. Without realizing that the reason the iPhone is better is because Apple makes money through all of these other ways, through the mandates they provide as a consequence of that ecosystem. They drive into the innovation of the iPhone that makes it so much better. And if we destroyed that if we made it interoperable and we destroyed this ecosystem building behavior for Apple, the iPhone would get, I can't say would get worse, but would cease to get better at the same rate. That is, 10 generations later, the quality of the iPhone would be significantly better if we allowed them to have an ecosystem versus didn't allow them to have an ecosystem, because suddenly they'd be conscious of the fact that a lot of revenue streams are being hit, R&D goes down, the primary product is now not innovated upon at the same pace. If we look at it through this lens, does this help? Like, now are we saying that consumers are better off because the iPhone is getting significantly better? The trade-off, of course, is that you have to buy a slightly worse earphone, but you know of this. There's cognizance prior to the original purchase.
To me, it just seems like Apple is scared of competition. I mean, multiple markets here. If you're so good, just produce an excellent product in every market, right? Like, let the iPhone sell on its own merit and let your other products sell on their own merit. Because ultimately, if you have an excellent, say, earphone or watch, which is so much better than Apple's, but consumers are not getting access to it, does having the great iPhone really help? And on the second point, I have another point, which is that, Apple is creating great iPhones today, but what's to say it's going to continue doing that? Because now it doesn't have incentives. Everyone is entrenched in that ecosystem, and eventually that pace of innovation will decline. It will be more. This is the essential monopoly problem that we didn't get to, but let me just lay it out here, which is that it doesn't have the incentive, once it has an entrenched position, to really create fabulous products. Its incentive then is to defend its position in that market, because it already has so much to lose. So it's going to kind of keep what it has and prevent losing that, rather than kind of making sure that it's creating these great disruptive products. So the problem with monopolies is that once you are in that significant position, the incentives are not to compete, right? The incentive is lobby the government to keep the position that I already have, make sure that regulations are in my favor, give the government whatever we want, a la, Elon Musk. And that leads to multiple issues. It's not just on the consumer front, it's on the broader political front, which is that I have this power, I need to keep it, and I'm going to do anything to keep it, including like do whatever the government tells me to do, etc., etc. So it leads to a fostering of sort of totalitarianism. Economic power is as problematic as political power, and both of them kind of foster each other. So that's the problem.
Again here, okay, I think you and the neoclassical libertarian fully agree. The libertarian will sort of come out and say something like, this is why the government should have no business in the market. Because when a crony capitalist walks up to the state and says, you must regulate in the following way or build walls around the following market so that my interests are protected, the state should be able to put up its hands and say, I can't. I mean, constitutionally, I don't have the authority to do this. Markets are supposed to be free fundamentally, and my business is just protecting negative rights. If your rights are being violated, please come to me. Otherwise, all the very best. It's a free market. So to that end, I feel like, again, the neoclassical types are in agreement with you. It's just on the incentive bit, I agree wholeheartedly. And I'm thinking that that's exactly why new businesses and new startups kill older companies. If you think about who's the forefront of, this is why new startups kill older businesses.
Older companies,
because if you think about who's the forefront of AI, for example, today, Google is genuinely struggling to keep up. They were not the first entrants in this space.
Correct.
Gemini has not performed as well as OpenAI has. Perplexity, OpenAI, Claude are all companies that fresh entrepreneurs have built. They did not have the data sets that Google had. They didn't have the sort of distribution, the consumer base, none of those things. And still beat a Google at this play. Simply because they were focused on a new product while the behemoths who existed prior got lazy and were focusing on making money off the businesses they already built, right? They were not really truly innovating and cutting edge. And maybe here one of the theories that may make sense is what Ashwath Damodaran talks about. He's a professor who teaches, if I'm not wrong, like investment at New York University. And he talks about the life cycle of a business, right? And so a business typically starts and it's like a baby. You need to pump it with a lot of money because you have to go and get market share and manufacture stuff, hire people, all of that, and build a product. Then you have like a growth phase where you hit product market fit and you're using the capital that you've raised or borrowed to go and scale that business and get it to as many hands as possible. Then you have like a spell of just making profits, right? And this is where you start maximizing shareholder value because these are folks who bet on you 20 years ago. And finally, you have market distribution. And so now it's time to pay them back. And this is where the value for consumers starts dropping because prices start going up.
Correct.
Products are not just as good. This is also the space where you start seeing new entrants walk into these markets. And then you have the decline phase where eventually businesses die. And I mean, he argues that businesses should die well. They should know, in fact, when their time is up and how to die properly because they have finished their life cycle. They have finished the cycle of building something and shipping something and then eventually dying. And I mean, I couldn't believe when Yahoo died, but Yahoo died. It was unthinkable to me that Google would beat Yahoo, but they did. And it's unthinkable to us that Google will die, but they will because somebody will build an AI product that is just better than them. And so when I think about digital companies like a Google or a Facebook, I feel like they're trying to not act their age. So you will have like a Google. It's also hard to understand what these companies truly are. There's no one sentence description.
Correct.
You start as a search engine, but then you do 10 other things, like you also build a YouTube and all that. Or in this case, they acquired YouTube, sure, but then they also make Pixel phones. They do lots of things. But if we try and break their business down into smaller components, like just the search business, just the phone manufacturing business, just the OS business, they are somewhere in this life cycle, no? Like I feel that in some cases they've just started. In some cases they're in that place where they're hiking up prices, but they're getting competition. In some cases they're already dying as a business. In some cases they never won. Like Google could never beat Facebook at social media.
Correct.
They tried building Google Plus and never worked out. So they had to quit early. So by that logic, all these businesses will run their course and they will get killed by new entrants.
Yes.
As long as we stay out of markets, no regulation, no nothing. We just stay out and we say, cool, let them function. So I'd love to understand more on the digital front. Like, is my estimate of how these things go too theoretical? Is it just like on paper? Or do you feel like even in the real world it could play out as such, and we just let free markets function, and entrepreneurs will kill other entrepreneurs?
So the question is how long it will take. Because we already see the effects of the power in terms of the political context, how it is changing, right? So it's not just something theoretical anymore. We've seen how, take Cambridge Analytica, take like the influence of elections, take sort of even how, the declining quality of Google search and the kind of results that you get on Google search, and the way that society is also changing. Forget about politics is changing, and you can't really divorce that from the rise of economic power, right? That's all kind of deeply connected. So while you wait for some disruptor to come, essentially also these are markets where there are forces that can perpetuate power for longer periods than other markets, because like we said, every market is different, and these markets have network effects, they have market tipping, they have data advantages, they have the ability to leverage power in ways that are much easier than other markets. So there is a lot of tendency towards power in these markets, and that has given these companies the kind of power that is unprecedented. I think most people agree that this is unprecedented. And we see the effect of that in the way that we live our lives at every moment, the kind of society that we're seeing being created. So if you wait for that power to diminish, it might be too late. And people are actually using that argument all the time that, these markets are dynamic, let's see where they go. But Google's power Facebook's power has been there for so long, and you're already seeing its impact. So if you keep waiting, then basically you already see the effect of that.
Can you give me an example of a problematic impact for either Google, Facebook, or both?
I mean, see the direct, like I said, Cambridge Analytica, etc., right? The ability to influence minds, the ability to influence elections, the ability to influence thinking. Now, Facebook is being sued by the Federal Trade Commission, so a lot of stuff is coming out in the US, right, with respect to how Facebook did not care about the impact that it had on consumers, on teenagers, the mental health issues, etc., right? Because the whole capitalism, right? Like, it just wanted to it cared about its bottom line. It didn't really care about how people were being impacted.
Yeah. Here I feel again you will receive agreement from a libertarian, because when it comes to children in specific, the broad consensus is that they are not capable of consent. Consent is the bedrock of like a neoclassical way of thinking about the world, that everybody can consent, everybody is an equal party at, from a leverage standpoint in consent. So children can't consent, hence Facebook should be ultimately serious about the impact that they have on humans who cannot consent to the service that they are in effect using. But when it comes to adults, right, adults using the service, there you may hear pushback, because they'll say, look, it's not as if these adults did not know that they were going to use a platform like this. There should be no...
Right. When they started using WhatsApp, they did not know that Facebook would start taking... In fact, when Facebook acquired WhatsApp, they said, we're never going to... It's technically impossible for us to share data, right? And they were fined for lying. So, I mean...
Yeah. So, corporations do lie, yes. I mean, they speak mistruths. Like, this is, terrible entrepreneurs who just have no regard for like a decent moral framework. But the harm principle takes care of that usually. So usually, like, if you use the harm principle as a way to figure out if somebody has done something wrong, then by and large it works. So lying is a problem because you have harmed people as a consequence of lying. Omission of information, I think, is like an interesting one, because if Facebook knew about the misuse of data that was taking place, consumer data, right, and omitted mentioning this in large part to their consumers, I'm sure there's a case that could be made. Like, you could walk up to a court and say, look, this is, they're cognizant that this is happening, there is omission of data, harm has taken place, hence we must, some sort of fine or some sort of action against Facebook. But none of this points towards not allowing them to have a monopoly. This is just saying that you can't use your monopolized position to harm people. We don't have a problem with you not having competition. We have a problem with harm. Whether that harm happens between individuals, like you murder somebody, or it's theft, or it's embezzlement, or it's omission of data at the time of signing a contract.
But
yeah.
if I can come. So the problem is they can do this because of the lack of competition. If the market was competitive, if Signal was equally popular to WhatsApp, right? So this is what happened so Facebook's acquisition of WhatsApp was not reviewed anywhere except in the EU. And the EU said, oh, there are so many competitors to WhatsApp that if WhatsApp tries to act funny, people will just move to others. But that never happened because of the power of network effects. It's not because people don't care about privacy, because even I do, but there's no one else on Signal. So who do I talk to on Signal?
I actually think people don't care about privacy because I'm also on Signal. I attempt to have as many of my conversations as I can on Signal as opposed to on WhatsApp.
We should talk on Signal.
Yeah, and I truly believe that people don't care about their privacy. I think it is like there is a class of like an elite, top 1% people who spend their time thinking about all these problems like monopolies and all that. And we're saying, yeah, I don't want the state or a private company to have my data. And I want people to volunteer this whenever required. And so you will see that it's the same subset of people who are like anti-Aadhaar, who are also anti-Facebook, right? Because broadly you're saying that I want my data to be with myself. But most people don't care. Like even with Aadhaar, most Indians didn't care. They were perfectly fine with the state having a copy of every single of their fingerprints. All 10 fingers, both my eyes, iris, you can have a copy of it, no problem at all. And that didn't irk anybody.
So it's the privacy paradox, right? So this is like the thing that has been referenced in sort of competition or discussions on privacy, that's what is brought up out very often as an argument, is that consumers don't care about privacy, so why should markets provide for it? But so when people are asked about whether they care for privacy, they do. They say, yes, we care. But when that is not reflected in their decisions as consumers in the market. So they do care about privacy. People do care. Like if you kind of just contextualize it and you ask someone, okay, would you care if someone could like see every aspect of your life, if they could like know who was coming in, going out, who you were talking to, what, then people will say, yes, we would care about that.
Yes.
But somehow behind the facade of a screen, those kind of decisions, the convenience takes over.
Yes.
And this is where the inability to process the complexities of privacy and what you can lose by sharing your data. It's hard for people to understand and process that. I tell my students all the time, don't do it, but I'm doing the very same things because it's just too hard.
Yeah, it's very convenient. And sure, you are right. I still think people vote with their feet. We should look at the actions of people and not the words of people. If you would ask somebody, I don't know, in the 1920s, what they wanted, they'd say faster horses. No one would think up an automobile. WhatsApp is an automobile. They have like presented an automobile and people are saying, yeah, cool. Like I'm willing to trade off. I feel at this point, even the general consensus is that we know that Facebook utilizes user information in all sorts of ways. And most adults still seem to want to be on Instagram, and which I will never get. Like I've never understood the Instagram question. But yeah, on Instagram or on Facebook or on WhatsApp, will not move to Signal. At this point, should not a regulator just look at this and say, cool, like we hear you loud and clear. You are okay trading privacy for convenience. It's a free market. You may trade as you please.
I would be okay with that in the absence of network effects, right? In the absence of the power of network effects, if you remove that and people still prefer WhatsApp, yes. But I think that really skews the equation.
But this network effect thing, the way that you let's say we want a world where we do not have network effects. The way that is accomplished is by forcing interoperability. Am I right? Is there any other path to not having network effects be fundamental to how this business grows?
Data portability, interoperability, product differentiation. Broadly,
right. Yeah. But then that kills innovation. So for example, if like WhatsApp wants to build a feature where you can long press a message and react with an emoji. God knows why they launched this, but they did. And now everybody just thumbs up each other's messages as opposed to saying, yeah, got it. Like we don't want to text each other anymore.
I think I did that.
No, yeah, I also do it at this point. Yeah. I've like bought into this way of communicating. I think Gmail is launching a feature where you can react to an email with an emoji.
Yes, you do. I get so many of those.
Oh, at this point, kill me then. But the ability to build that feature is one that comes up in the brain of an engineer or a product manager at Meta.
Yeah.
And they say, hey, I have this idea. We should like allow people to just thumbs up a message.
Yeah.
And they have a full brainstorming session, coders get involved, they build out the feature and they launch.
Yeah.
How do I port this information? How do I port a thumbs up on a message to Signal? At that point, then we have to wait for Signal to build the identical feature for me to be able to make these two interoperable.
Yeah.
This just kills capitalism. I mean, the best entrepreneurs will cease to build messaging apps the day you force interoperability, because they'll say, then I'm not like, I have to wait for everybody else to catch up with me. I'm not 100% innovating for the ideas that come out of me and my organization. Since you're pro-innovation, right? Like you're saying, monopoly bad because one of the reasons is that it kills innovation. Like monopolies don't innovate as well as competing markets do.
Yeah.
In this case, breaking up this, like forcing interoperability will kill innovation.
I'm actually okay with that. So,
yeah,
because what is at least in your example, what is the innovation, right? Emojis, etc.
Yes.
Ways of keeping consumers within the ecosystem, which is really a waste of time for consumers, etc. Yeah, I know I'm being very paternalistic here, but I just feel that again, with the Instagram product, with the way that product is being designed, it's to keep it's playing on our emotions and our biases and our limitations to their advantage, right? And while I'm being extremely paternalistic, I think that if there was more competition, you might see better kinds of innovation or different kinds of innovation, or at least you will not see harmful innovation. So to me, I'm okay with not having innovation that I think is ultimately going to be harmful, because I feel like at some level, we have bought into these things and maybe we need some level of paternalism. That's my feeling on that.
Right. At the cost of consent.
Yes. It's not at the cost of consent. It's at the cost of maybe innovation.
No, I think consent. And I would think of it like this. Okay, so forget private limited companies. Yeah, like a true libertarian would say that even a private limited company is created by the state. Like PVT Ltd, state created. Rubbish. We don't agree with all that. We only think about private contracts, right? Like you are an adult, right to contract, I'm an adult, right to contract. You and I shake hands and say we're going to start building a business together, right? This doesn't have to be a registered business. We don't have to call it a business. You and I are going to get into enterprise together. The enterprise is that we make a messaging app. Great. Person 3 enters this discussion and says, hey, I want to use a messaging app. My family and I have to converse with each other. And we say, cool, you can use this messaging app. Here's the terms and conditions document. It runs 300 pages long, but it's available for you to peruse. You can sign off on this contract and then start using the messaging app, right? We've all agreed to this. Now the state is stepping in and adding something to the mix. They're saying something like, you have to make the data export something that is interoperable. That is, if somebody else decides to build a messaging app somewhere else in the world, you should be able to operate with that. Except I'm not consenting. I mean, this is my enterprise. I get to do what I want.
Correct.
And those consumers are adults who make their own choices. So they're consenting to utilizing this product.
Correct.
So there's a violation of consent. That is...
Yeah, any regulation is, right?
Right, yeah. I mean, sure. This is all at gunpoint.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking my point still stands in that it is a violation of consent. Like you're stepping in and saying that we're no longer making this optional. It is mandatory for it to be interoperable.
In fact, the Digital Markets Act mandates interoperability. So this is actually happening, but it's not actually worked out that well. I think like I said, any regulation in some way is an imposition, right? But when you are that powerful and you're able to exploit your power, and you are exploiting your power, but even if you're not, the fact that you are able to exploit at that scale, I think you need to be reined in. And if that violates your consent, I'm okay with that, right? I think I'm fine with that. And on the innovation front, I feel like you can definitely create products where interoperability doesn't diminish innovation. I think that you cannot use the tech as an excuse. I think the tech can be built around it. I mean, just I think it's about imagination, what kind of products you want to create. I think there can be a lot of innovation around interoperability. It's just about how creative you are with it.
Right. But do you not feel it is a strange world in which the government prevents me from building a non-interoperable messaging app? That is a little bit bonkers, isn't it? Like, if that's the world I live in, where as somebody who wants to sit and build something, code something on a laptop, the one thing I'm not allowed to do is build a messaging app that does not meet interoperability standards. That is state intervention going too far. Or do you feel like, no, it's reasonable actually? Because messaging apps have a network effect, it's reasonable to prevent developers from even building an app that is not operable across.
So I think the obligation should only be cast on players which hold significant positions, not on players that are just coming up in the market. So only on WhatsApp. I'm not saying Signal should be forced to interoperate if they don't want to. I'm saying Signal should have the option to be able to acquire consumers through interoperability with WhatsApp.
And because I hear your concerns on privacy, right? While the state should regulate interoperability, they should not regulate, in your mind, for example, data sharing with the state, right? Like that regulation should not explicitly have a backdoor to allow the state to be able to view private conversations if they so want to. Yeah, so like, I mean, there is a limit. We're saying that the state can regulate interoperability, but the regulation can't say something like this new standard has to have a backdoor for me to be able to view conversations. Correct. If I'm able to get a I don't know, like a subpoena for this, right?
Yeah, so the regulation should fix the market, the issue of competitiveness in the market. Like that's what we're talking about, essentially, right? I'm not like on the state should like impose all kinds of constraints. I'm saying there's an issue of market power that needs to be addressed. It's preventing competition and it's harming consumer welfare. So we need to open up the market. That's all.
Got it. Sorry, two things I want to double click on. So first on just the privacy question. Signal is awesome. Signal is awesome because it's open source. People contribute voluntarily to building Signal. They don't get paid a salary. It stands alive as a consequence of donations. Again, voluntary donations that people give unto Signal. I'm trying to imagine.
Only it doesn't have very good jiffies.
Yeah, and that was actually an example I wanted to bring up but didn't because I thought it's a tangent. But if you think about like emojis, GIFs and all of that, there is still a private company somewhere who has done the hard work of collating GIFs. Okay, like across the internet, they've gone and found GIFs that make sense and collated them. Then Facebook has stepped in and said, "Hey, I want this," and signed a contract. Okay, and this shows up on like let's say WhatsApp. You use this GIF in a conversation. If you want interoperability, this GIF can't move because it's the licensed property
Correct.
of somebody else. So a lot of pragmatic. I mean, then what would we do? Would we just prevent this contract? Like, no, you can't sign contracts specifically with some parties to get GIFs because it then breaks interoperability. I am now not incentivized to move because with my brother, for example, our conversations are just in like the office GIFs. Right? It's like Michael yelling. Yeah, that's all it is. So then I'd have not even a coherent conversation with him left if I had to move that over, right? I think,
I again think we're only limited by our creativity in terms of how we can solve for that. I think you can solve for that. I think entrepreneurship can solve for all kinds of things. A, and B, if you can't solve for that, then okay, the market will figure that out. But that should be an option, which is not there right now.
I think it is. So, for example, Signal chats are exportable, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So, you can export a Signal chat. If it's an encrypted export, you will have a decryption key. And then I don't know if it is, for example, something I can pull into another, like a Wire or some other, encrypted messaging app. But theoretically, the open source community is such that they will figure out interoperability. Like if I want to move Signal to Wire, I should be able to because both of them are. I don't know if Wire is open source, but okay, broadly, similar mindsets.
But not WhatsApp. Like you can't.
Yeah.
If I only want to be on Signal, but everyone I know is on WhatsApp, that I can't message people while I'm on Signal. Because the rest of them are all on.
I know. I mean, this is the locker all over again, right?
Yeah.
You are choosing. I would submit to use WhatsApp because the cost of not talking to those people is significantly higher.
Yeah. I mean, what's the purpose of being on an app if you can't talk to people?
Correct. Yeah. Because you're on Signal, but there's no messages.
Yeah. Correct.
Yeah. Correct. And so for the interoperability.
But it's not like the locker, right? Because this is a powerful company with an entrenched position that is not making its products open to competitors, and therefore limiting competition.
Yeah,
which is they are fully obviously going to do that unless someone tells them not to.
No, I would actually think that they're encouraging competition because Signal would not have the rise it did sans WhatsApp. The reason people use Signal is because people like us who are cognizant about privacy being a concern are saying, I'm not trading off my privacy actually. Wherever possible, I'm going to move to Signal.
That is despite the lack of interoperability.
Okay, I can see where we are looking at this in different ways. Like I hear you. I mean, and I don't know if there's a counterfactual I could use to prove otherwise. We'd have to go back in time,
Okay.
reset the world in such a way that you had a competitive space,
Yeah.
and then come back and see if signal was just as big or just as small. Because my guess would be something like, if WhatsApp was interoperable, great on privacy and all, you would never even use signal because everybody's already on WhatsApp.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So
correct.
yeah, exactly. So
Yeah,
then it would
we're
not
agreed.
actually be great for competition because then signal wouldn't exist.
But that's the thing. Like when you like WhatsApp was great in the beginning, right? Like absolutely privacy centric. I mean, all of that, right? And with the acquisition and then the need to monetize, the need to for Facebook to kind of keep its power, extend its power, all of the problems started coming.
Yeah.
So it's the power that I'm concerned with, right? If WhatsApp originally was great.
Yeah, but also bankrupt. I mean, they were struggling to because
I'm okay with
we're
that.
just selling millions of messages, and there's a developer somewhere going, "How the hell am I paying for any of this?"
Yeah.
Yeah, and then $1 billion to Facebook makes a difference, I think, in helping solve that question.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think this has been like really fun. So, what I'm thinking of is maybe we take a quick break.
Yeah.
Because we have crossed the 1 hour mark easy.
Oh wow.
Get some water, maybe a snack or two, and
Yeah.
then come back after the break.
Yeah. Let's
Yeah.
do that.
Awesome. Hi, Shilpi. Welcome back.
Thank you. Great to be back.
In the digital world, the current large players for mobile phone operating systems are Apple and Google. Apple with its iOS, Android with, Google with Android. And one of the things that caught my attention recently was the Epic Games issue. So Epic Games wanted to process transactions on their Apple app, the iOS app, but not pay the 30% tax that this brings with it. Right? Okay. Now I'll try and make the case from Apple's POV. This is what Apple and Google have been saying forever.
Yeah.
Which is, we built the hardware, right, the phone, and consumers came to buy that phone and place a lot of trust in us. So that's the first large argument. A lot of trust in us as a brand who's built this phone. And because we know the hardware really well, we've had to build like a general IDE to allow developers to build apps inside this world. So for example, write an app in Swift, because that's the way to build an app that works within our OS, and that's reasonable. We there's no other way to go about this. We have to tell you how to build an app that operates on our operating system. Now that we've done that and you've built the app, the consumer still has placed trust in us. That's argument number one. And so we are obligated to check your app, make sure it's safe, right? All of those things that come with making sure it's not exploitative in some way, it's not a scam, and then pass it on to the consumer, right? So one, this costs us. It costs us money to make it simple for you as the developer to leverage my distribution. I have billions of devices out there, but if you want to leverage my distribution, I have to have a whole team of people who step up and build the tools required for you to deliver this app, right? So that costs me money. And then second, making it safe costs me money, right? So that's, and then second, I'd like to keep the cost of the phone as low as possible, right? And one way to keep the cost of the phone low so that consumers win and we get more distribution, and if we get more distribution, I win, but also you win, because as a developer, you reach more people than you would otherwise, because now we have distributed to more people have bought these phones, is for me to subsidize some part of my income via the apps themselves. Right? And for all this, for the safety of the platform, for the work I'm putting in to allow you to build and leverage distribution that I've made, for my ability to subsidize the rates of the phone for the end consumer, all that put together, I'm charging you a 30% fee. Right? That's like the Apple tax. You pay it for every in-app transaction. The way we enforce this is through the payment gateway. So we say that it's just a single payment gateway, you have to use mine. That's the only way I'm able to enforce at a global scale that you are going to pay me this 30% fee. It's a subscription fee for you to use the product. And most payment gateways do this. Like Razorpay in India charges a 2% fee for all transactions that occur on the Razorpay platform. It's how they keep their servers alive and all of that. Now, that's Apple's POV, right? We're just a very sweet company building a great product, striving for excellence, right? For consumers and for developers. And we have to keep the lights on. And to keep the lights on, 30% is what we charge.
Chandeliers.
Right. Yeah, many lights. And you could choose not to. I mean, no one's asking you to build an app. Or if you could still build one and sideload it onto phones, you could build an app on the Microsoft platform, because you could distribute on Windows devices. You could do many other things, right? People could just come to your web page and still access the product on a web page. So I'm not forcing you to build an app. You could be any type of entrepreneur. You could decide to make pots. You could decide to, build an airplane manufacturing company. You could do anything at all, right? There's no compulsion for you to build a mobile application. But if you do and you so choose to use our distribution, then these are the terms, right? Now this is Apple's POV. What is the counter? What is problematic here?
Okay, so firstly, just because we're looking at it within the app distribution market, so when we look at it in that market, then sort of other things that you can do become kind of like not that relevant. So in that market, there are only two serious options, right? I mean, if
Yes.
you want consumers to get to know who you are, otherwise you will be in like spending a lot of money. Yes, I agree with you that it comes with a lot of benefits, right? But so the problem is that charge, right? You Apple and Google, they both have the right to charge. No one is saying that they should provide these products for free, right? It's the method by which you're charging and the amount that you're charging is problematic because it's not giving app developers those options to choose. So at least this is what the Competition Commission of India is also saying, and I agree with them on the Google case, the Google Play Store case, where they said that allow for, so basically what Google and Apple are doing is that they're not allowing other app developers, other payment gateways to be present at all, right? If it's being done for the sake of remuneration, you can, I think it's already happening now as a result of regulation that they're finding other ways of getting, like you don't have to route every transaction through your payment gateway to get the remuneration. You can find other ways of getting remuneration, right? And the fact that they're able to charge this kind of a commission rate because they are literally the only two app stores, and they have restricted the ability of other app stores to come up by not allowing the distribution of other app stores, etc., means that app developers don't have an option. And to me, yes, security gets thrown, privacy, all these things get thrown around as justifications. What's to say that a competitive market won't be able to provide a better product? To me, a competitive market with more players would be able to give you all of these things because that's the very definition of competition. So to me, I'm not convinced by that argument that, okay, I'm giving you stuff and therefore, yes, you're giving, but also you're restricting. So don't restrict me from accessing other payment gateways. And then if you're really the best, then people will pay you that amount. So do that without restriction, and that will be more convincing for me.
Got it. So the challenge is not the 30% fee. So if Apple continued to mandate that they will collect 30% of all transactions that take place in the app, but allow other payment gateways and say that even on those transactions we want 30%.
Yeah.
That is fine. Like, is the problem 30% or is it other payment gateways?
It's both. So the 30% is not because of the payment gateway. The 30% is because of power in the app store market.
Correct. Distribution
right?
that they have, yeah.
So there, I think that they need to allow for distribution of other app stores through their app store, which I know is kind of a little problematic for the free market thinkers, etc., to think about, to like allow your competition. But I think when you're that powerful and you've like, and it comes down to also these being the two dominant operating systems. Why? Because Google also prevented Android forking to come up through major restrictions on their contracts. So there's also a role they have played in perpetuating these two operating systems from being the most powerful ones, and then restricting the ability of others to come up and then sort of charging the commission, which is a very classic sort of monopoly thing, right? So again, if you are a monopolist by virtue of just being the best, not restricting competition, not entering into any restrictive agreements, you are just giving consumers and you're just giving developers and you're just so good, I would be okay with the 30% commission. But that's not what's happening here. So
got it. What if Apple shipped the iPhone with no app store, right? So Apple said, here is a phone, and this is how Nokia did it. Every other phone manufacturer in history has done phones in exactly one way. They build all the apps, the phone app, the messaging app, the snake game that I remember I used to play quite a bit on the Nokia I had. And that's it. You get that phone. all apps in that product are governed by the company. Some of them have in-app payments, some of them don't, some of them have subscriptions, some of them don't. But the company builds, runs, operates all apps within that phone. Is that fine? Because at this point, there is no Play Store. There is not even the concept of a Play Store. Apple just makes all the apps that they make, ships all the apps, and consumers only have access to those apps. At this level, is this anti-competitive?
So there's no restriction on, like, the phone is coming with a bunch of apps, right?
Correct.
And that phone belongs to Apple and the apps belong to Apple.
Correct. I mean, the phone has been sold.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the apps have been developed by Apple.
Yeah. I mean, it is still problematic in the way that if you have a phone with a bunch of apps pre-installed, people are not going to really look for other apps, because so you're using your position in the iPhone market to remove competition in the app market because you're selling your phone only with your app.
Sure, but there is no app market. I mean, if we go back 20 years, 30 years, there is no such thing as an app market.
You're saying no one is developing apps.
I mean, because there is no way to distribute apps. Think about the Nokia world, right? Like with keypad phones. BlackBerry, Nokia, etc. had a good 10-year reign before the Apple launched, or a lot of companies launched like smartphones. At that time, all apps that came on your phone were pre-installed. The company that sold you the phone also built those apps.
You could download from the internet.
Yeah, I think Nokia you could actually. You could go on like the web and download side-loaded apps. But I mean, it's also possible that Nokia didn't give you a web browser. You know, I mean, I'm just saying that it's all of their own volition. They can choose what to include in this piece of hardware.
Correct.
And so they could choose not to include a web browser. I mean, the early version of a phone was just that, right? It was call people, text people, play a few games that we pre-installed for you, and that's that. And my thinking is that at that time, no one's like pointing fingers and saying what you should be doing is building a store that allows other people to come and, give consumers apps. Much less that you must have an open market of stores where, anybody can build a store for your phone to host other apps.
So Microsoft was found guilty of violation of competition law for pre-installing Windows Media Player, right? And also for the Netscape thing in the US. So because they used their distributional advantage by virtue of having Windows OS to build the media player, and there were a lot of other better media players, to be honest. Windows Media Player was not the best. But because it came pre-installed, I mean, it just became the dominant one.
Yeah.
And that was found to be anti-competitive, and I agree with that decision of the European.
Yeah, and I agree with your estimate of Windows Media Player. It was terrible. VLC for the win. I never got, No, but I'm thinking more like, what if, so of course, on a Windows device, you can go on the internet, download a .exe file, and that you could install that application on your...
Yeah. If you can't do that.
But the .exe is something that Windows has created and said, hey, if you guys want to build applications for my products, then you can, and here's the format in which you build it. Right? So there is explicit communication from the manufacturer saying, I want external participation, and this is the format in which that participation should take place. But it could also be possible that Apple, Microsoft, etc. say we don't want external participation, which was true of the early years of smartphone building. You got this and that's that. Like, we gave you a spreadsheet product and that's that. There is no way to download an external app. That doesn't exist. Like, if you download it, it will not install because I have not made open the specifications for how an application should run on my operating system. Right? In that world, my thinking is that there is no competition problem. The option does not even exist for third-party players to operate on this OS. We can't force manufacturers to open source their OS. So like, make this, we can't say you have to allow other people to put apps here. It's not even an option on the table.
Because the tech doesn't exist, or because they don't want it to exist?
I mean, the company has not even bothered exploring that option. Like, it's not on the list of things to do.
Yeah. So again, the problem would be if these are powerful players who are restricting the development of technology to suit their own ends, and that then harms consumers. So to me, you are not making your device consumer friendly. It could be a much better device, but because you want to restrict others from competing with you, and you are in this position, if you don't have power, I don't have an issue with anything that you do, because the market will work itself out, and you won't be able to get away with doing this. But you have power, so you have some ability to influence consumers, and you're using that to sell a product that's not so good.
And the concern for you is that it's not a good product. Is that like the and the reason I'm thinking this is an example is I feel like what Apple has done or Microsoft has done or any of these companies have done is increase freedom. So there was the option to not even have an app store. They could have a team of developers building games and shipping games.
Correct.
So one example maybe, I don't game, but if you think about like a Sony PlayStation or a Switch, right? In this case, Nintendo is the only company who can build games. And if you want to build a game for the Switch, you have to go to Nintendo and say, hey, listen, I want to build a game. And you go through a long, protected contract. And then the game is built because it's proprietary hardware. And I can't build a game for it unless the company were to share with me how to build for this operating system in specific. I need a lot of technical specifications before I can build a game for this space, right? So there are examples where, companies say, I own the hardware, I own the software. You only get to play those games that I launch for you. If I don't launch it, you don't get to play it.
Yeah.
And we don't have anybody going after them saying, you must, the state or regulators going after them saying, you must do this. I feel like the reason they're going after Apple or Google is because they made the error of increasing freedom, where they've said, we'll build a Play Store and allow developers to come in. But of course, here there's a financial transaction involved because we have additional steps to ensure that these apps work on our OS. And now suddenly they ask us, if you're doing that, then allow additional Play Stores. That is, the freedom you've allowed us is not enough. Whereas if they'd not allowed that at all, then there is no competition case to start. I don't know if I'm making sense in...
Yes, you're making sense. So I agree that the development of app stores was great. Innovative product, allowing the distribution of apps. Not sure if apps are the best way to go. If there could have been like better ways to go and whether this is a more restrictive way to go, and the way it went this way because it suited Apple and Google.
Right.
That is always a concern I have. That the development of tech that we see is at least has happened in a way that has suited the growth of big tech, rather than diminished it until AI. We can talk about AI maybe later, but so you developed this, it suited you. You were able to sell more phones because you had this. So it wasn't just that you were doing everyone else a favor. You would, like, no one is running a charity here.
100%. It's symbiotic. The more applications I have, the more likely consumers want to buy my phone.
Yeah. So now you have this power both over the developers and the consumers. So now you're in a different situation from when you started the App Store, right? So now the game changes. Once you have that power, how do you use it? And if you're using it to now prevent the tech from developing further, and that is harming app developers and consumers. So that is my problem.
I don't know this, but you may. When Apple initially launched the store, the App Store, or Google, the Play Store, did they start off with a 30% commission, or was the commission lower?
No, they didn't. So that was actually mentioned in this Competition Commission of India's order, that you didn't start off with this kind of commission. You're also not charging it from everyone.
Yes.
Like, you're not charging it from e-commerce. You're not charging it from a bunch of apps. So that's also discriminatory. And you weren't doing it earlier. So there is like a way by which you had decided you could fund your app store without doing this. And now you're charging some apps a bunch of money.
Oh, like that. The other way to view the same two things would be, on one side, the things that they exclude from the 30% tax is real world businesses. So if you're selling a real physical product, then we're not going to mark that up by 30%. Yeah. But if it's a fully digital transaction, so you're buying coins inside a game, then we're going to mark that up by 30%.
Correct.
So it's discretionary, but it's not arbitrary. They've been quite clear actually about what they will charge for and won't charge for.
But correct.
Yeah, you can lobby here. Like I have seen instances of companies reaching out, and so if I'm not wrong, the Netflix / other OTT companies did a good job of lobbying Apple and saying, look, as an industry, we can't do 30%. I don't remember the specifics here, but I know that some concessions were given in that space. But again, within private parties, I mean, Netflix is a large company lobbying for their own interests, Apple, large company for their own interests. They're having a conversation, arriving at a mutually agreeable consensus, and then, sort of proceeding. And that discussion is something that private parties are allowed. I'm allowed to charge you a differential fee for a product and somebody else a differential fee because I'm the one selling it. I can also refuse to sell it. That is, since I own the asset and it is my property, I can do with it what I will. And using my discretion to charge differentially is one of the things that I'm allowed to do or should be allowed to do. So that's sort of like one part of this. And the second part of this is that the way to justify starting off free and then introducing the 30% tax is the same way you justify Zepto giving you like a free first delivery, right? Which is no one knows the product exists. No one knows this is a real market. So we're heavily subsidizing with venture capital. Again, all consensual parties. Venture capitalists agree to give me money. I have agreed to take it. I'm spending it. You are arriving. But in my terms and conditions, I have been clear that at a future date, if I so intend to, I can introduce like a fee. So there is supposed to be cognizance, right? Here, I understand actually how developers are caught off guard because most developers consumers don't read terms and conditions, right? It's just too long and verbose, and you usually tick it off and you say, okay, great, I'm going to launch. And then 3 years later, when you have a steady stream of income, at that point you're being hit with a 30% tax. That's quite jarring as an experience. So maybe like the argument to be made here is they should have been more upfront about the fact that at a future date, I could charge for this, or more announcements, something like that. But the charging of the fee itself, that cannot be one that is questionable, because that is fully in their discretion. I mean, they own the entire pipeline.
So what you call discretion, the law calls discrimination.
Right. Yeah.
So like there should be a reasonable basis for why some people are being charged on others. Just because it's a physical good, does that mean that they're not getting the same kind of services from Apple or Google, or they're not benefiting in the same way from that distribution? So that's at least what the argument of these app developers like Cuckoo FM and those who kind of Match.com who came up with the case said, right? And then they got thrown off of app stores because they didn't come. Also that, like, you have that kind of power where you can just throw apps out and they will lose all of their business.
Yes.
So you're exercising your discretion. There's a power attached to that. And so, again, the voluntariness of that goes away because of that kind of power that is there. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, but you're right. In fact, I'm okay to switch the word to discrimination. The question still is, I feel like when of course, I'm talking about social discrimination at this point, but when you choose to discriminate, there's a mind virus, right? Like you are infected with an idea, a meme, an idea about somebody being inferior or superior, whatever this is. And there is no way that the state has any space to take that idea out of your brain. If you are infected with like if you believe in caste and you think that discrimination based on caste is reasonable, at best the state can come in and say that it is illegal to discriminate based on caste, but cannot remove the virus from your brain. Right? Yeah. Now, so we know that the state is not capable of on an individual basis. So you could argue that over 2 generations it's possible if we just make it illegal for the idea to eventually dissolve. Whether true or not, whether we will see it or not, is like hard to quantify, but that's an argument that could be made. But for the individual, no amount of making something illegal will change the mind virus. Right? If I believe it, and that's that. Okay, and on the other side, I have the right to freely contract. So for example, if I run a storefront, or maybe a storefront is still a bad idea. Let's say that I am somebody who helps people cross the road, right? That's my service. My service is, if you're like an old woman, old man, you don't know how to cross the road, I'm going to help you across the road, right? That's my full service. On the other side, you pay me a certain amount of money. I can choose who I want to help across the road and who I don't. And I could discriminate based on caste, on gender, on, I don't know, nationality, ethnicity, any sort of bizarre, absurd, whether you're bald or not, right? Whether you're tall or short, any of those discriminations. Now, again, I'm trying to make the liberal case here. Would just say that morally this is repugnant. But where does the state have to intervene? Because what we should be doing is upholding your right to offer a service when you want to. And there is no way for me to will you into action. I cannot force you to help somebody cross the road, or prevent you from helping somebody cross the road. Right? This is private parties agreeing. If you choose not to agree, then what can we do? Like, it's repugnant. It's horrible that you have these moral positions. But what role can we play? So that's on a social level. But I feel like the same discrimination argument carries across the entire board, right? Why is there no right to discriminate? It just feels like that this is my body, these are my hands and my legs and my voice. And if I so choose not to engage with somebody, then I'm choosing not to engage with somebody. Why must you encroach on my freedoms and my bodily rights to force me to do something I don't want to do?
Okay, so you definitely believe that the state should not discriminate, right?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, all these arguments, of course, being made in the context of a podcast.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
But in this context,
yeah,
absolutely, the state has no business discriminating, because the liberal values that carry through across the constitution to everybody, irrespective of any of the things that individuals may discriminate based on.
So competition law does not allow, at least in India, does not allow dominant monopolies to discriminate, because it's an exercise of power. Especially if that discrimination is going to have effects that are anti-competitive in the market. That means it's preventing people from exercising their freedom to do business and their ability to carry on their business and to be able to compete effectively. So when you're powerful, like I'm saying, the game changes, right? Because then everything matters. What you do matters. And I think the state has a say, and that's part of what like allows for competition law to come about in the first place, in the way that resources get distributed. So if you are a holder of a very significant resource in society and you're not using that resource responsibly, then I think the state has a say in that, and at least I think the state should also have a say. It does have a say when it comes to India, but I'm saying it should also have a say in that.
Got it, understood. And I think the reason I brought this up was, this is probably the point at which, like, the neoclassical liberal types will start diverging from, I think, where you stand, because their point of view will simply be that the state attempting to fix discriminative behavior makes things worse, not better. And by and large, the moral positions of a society will change. And you are right that, like, the most meaningful critique of the libertarian position is gradualism, that it will only happen gradually. But shoving anything down somebody's throat, whatever it is, it could be a market change, it could be a social change, has unintended consequences in society that no bureaucrat can anticipate, and is worse than the evil that you're attempting to correct and fix, and will leave longer lasting impacts. So what does one say to that? Like, how do we handle this sort of, like, you don't know what you're messing with. Like, the free market operates a certain way because unaggregated individuals there's no centralized decision making, and this high modernism of the state deciding what ought to happen has unintended consequences that even the bureaucrat does not know or even have an incentive to avoid.
So I think in the context of our discussion, the state is stepping in to reduce the power that exists, to disperse power. And I think the moment power gets dispersed, things get better, because that's when the market mechanism actually works, right? So the market mechanism is not working. That's why the state is stepping in. And yes, it may not be ideal. It may not be perfect, but the current situation is not perfect as well. And there's uncertainty on both ways, right? So there is this entire concept of error cost frameworks, which has kind of perpetuated the anti-enforcement view in competition law, right? That if you have to, because there will be mistakes with respect to how you enforce, or the decision making that goes into enforcement, because a lot of it is sort of looking at what's going to happen in the future. So that mistake should be on the side of non-intervention. I am not convinced by that, because I feel that when there is power, you're not intervening, it's because you really have this belief that the market mechanism will fix that power, which I really don't believe will happen in every situation. It could happen when the market is structured in such a way that it allows for contestability. And yes, it will eventually happen, but like we discussed earlier, I feel that might be too late. So I feel that yes, erring in favor of enforcement, even if it has costs, is to me a better path.
Got it. And we talk a lot, I mean, you've mentioned the word power quite frequently, as that being the tipping point. Like, once you are in a position of reasonable power,
that is the tipping point.
Then having the state intervene is reasonable and justified. Before that, it does not even matter. If you have a niche monopoly but not a position of power, then it's not really what the state should be spending its time on. Regulation shouldn't really be looking at that space. And one of the ways to articulate a situation is to phrase it as a power dynamic, right? Is to say that there are the powerful and the less powerful, and that is sort of what the language around that dynamic is structured as. And I'm wondering if it is an accurate way to summarize the situation, right? When we think about, let's say, Google or Facebook, these larger digital companies that you have spent more of your time focused on, what is the consequence of this power? That is, they have power, and on one side, I mean, that is power within their market. So search will predominantly happen on Google, and so they have the ability to skew search results. That is an example of power that they wield, because most consumers do search on Google. Or app developers have to toe the line on 30% tax. They can raise the tax or drop it based on their whims and fancies because they control distribution. These are some examples of power. And then on the other side, there's political power, right? So I can sit across the table from the President of the United States and have a conversation about a section in the Constitution that needs to change to further accommodate my business, and have it go through Congress or through Indian House of Parliament, whatever. And that latter, you and I agree on, as does the classical liberal, right? So that's the position I'm trying to hold, where they'll just say, yeah, of course, like, we don't want the state. In fact, we want the state to be powerless when it comes to markets. So, Trump should be able to put out his hands and say, I'm sorry, Tim, but there is no way for me to do any of this. I have no control over, like import, export, tariffs. Tariffs are not even in my domain of things I can do. Constitutionally, it's not allowed. Right? So that's the political side is something that you have agreement on broadly from all sides of the spectrum. Except for a few conservative types, by and large, people will say, yeah, we don't want the state wielding the sort of power that helps entrench monopolies and allow for cronyism. But on this side, which is power within a certain market, I'm not sure that power is as problematic as perhaps you think it is. And of course, I mean, what this means is that they'll make a lot of money. They'll make like a huge, bottom line. They'll have thousands of employees who all get paid. They'll be able to pay their employees well. They'll have like huge offices. I mean, people who work at Google have no specific problems in life. They're actually quite happy because, they have different flavors of ice cream in their office, right? Like, yeah, they get a masseuse at the office when they so want one. These are great places to work, right? Those are not the workers that most activists are running out to defend. And so, the products are fairly inexpensive. Consumers are happy with the products. You use YouTube or whatever, like the Play Store or search, and you're by and large happy. And I mean, I use DuckDuckGo as an alternate search engine. So there is a way to move. Like, it's not like there are no other search engines. They do exist, but they'll be smaller because they can't hit the sort of efficiencies that Google can hit. Google will die because...
Also, Google has paid to be the default search engine on multiple people, multiple corporations, right? So it's not just that it's like just so great and therefore it's there. It's because it's like made sure the competition doesn't really get a chance to be there.
They furthered their monopoly in as many ways as possible. And the end effect of their power is deep pockets. They make a lot of money. That is not fundamentally problematic. At least the liberal will argue that rich people can be rich and corporations can be rich and good for them if they make a lot of money. I'm trying to think about, like, where is the exploitation here? So they have power and they're exploiting this power to further their monopoly. But who is really losing in all of this? It feels like across the board, by and large, everybody is generally happy with the outlook on, we like this product, we're using it, they're making a lot of money, but it's useful as a product for me. Double thank you, win-win, greater than its parts. All of the typical capitalist points of view. If it's not the political power, if it's just economic, is that still a concern to you? And if so, why?
So it is a concern to me that they make a lot of money because that money is going from certain sections of society that have less of it. And when money travels in that direction, it is generally not used as efficiently, right? So when people have a lot of money, they will use it to buy multiple ice cream flavors, whereas when people don't have a lot of money, they'll use it to get an education and get a treatment for a disease, right? So that's like the inequality that is perpetuated by sort of having large corporations, which is the concentration of wealth, which is actually the reason why a lot of competition regimes, like India's first competition regime, which was the Monopolies and Restricted Trade Practices Act, came about in the 1960s, because of the concentration of wealth in the hands of few. So that is also public concern, that is not the kind of world that we want to live in. So I do have a problem with that in itself, but also just the whole, Google search, everyone I think will agree, is getting poorer with time, right? And it's still very popular. So it's not delivering as a product anymore. It was.
But what is better, like in your mind, which competing product today offers a better search alternative?
No, I don't. I still use Google. I still use Google search, but I'm not happy with it at all. Like, I do try to use DuckDuckGo, but somehow
it's worse.
Somehow it I think for India it's not that great. Also it hangs like on my Apple
they have a little Indian toggle on top. But DuckDuckGo also is getting worse. I think that search in general over the last 4 years has gotten worse. Like I said, it's in that cycle where it's peaked. And now they're just past their peak, which means they're more focused on making profits. And at some point, this product will die. There will be a day when Google says, we no longer offer Google search. Thank you very much. And by then, you'll be using Perplexity or Claude or GPT or something else to do searches, because that's so much better. You're not just running an index and giving you a list of websites, but just giving you an answer. So it's just a better product in so many ways. And that's how these companies die. They die because a better company is built, not a competing similar company. Like the way you beat this duopolistic big ones is that you just build a new business that's better, does the same thing but significantly better. It's hard to think of it. Like 2 years back, nobody would have thought of quick commerce. It would not have even been a thought on somebody's mind. But it comes out of the blue, and then it takes over, and that's the new way to do something.
Correct.
But so I want to go back to your point on the utilization of money, right? Again, the pro-capitalist voice would say that money is actually very well used by the capitalist enterprise. So even if all you're doing is providing different ice cream flavors to employees, there is an ice cream manufacturing company behind that who is employed, has employees, is earning money. Bottom line, those employees make money, which means that capital goes towards the things you mentioned, which is schooling for their children, clothes that they spend on, all of that. If we want to grow net consumption and we want an efficient use of capital, the capitalist market does that really well, because companies are really good at using money efficiently. That's actually all they do. Their prime concern is...
Initially, I would say, but not when they're that big. I think when they're that big, it's hard to manage as efficiently as when they are in their early stages.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think I would agree to some extent here. It's why they get toppled actually, because you have a startup who's just much better at handling the same amount of capital. So like $1 million will beat a couple $1 billion that Google throws into the same thing. It's true. But the point still remains, I think, that capitalist enterprise is a good use of money. Like by and large, that's why they win. Whenever you capture a market, it's because you've done well in terms of net dollar utilization. What's come in versus what's going out. You're delivering a disproportionately high value for how much money you've spent to deliver that value. And then the bottom line that you're left with is enough to fuel the business and pay employees and, put back into R&D and all of those things. So what I'm trying to attack is the root of the assumption that inequality is a problem. Poverty is a problem, right? There I can level with you. It's truly an issue if you can't afford enough food to put on your plate. But if you make $100,000 a year and your boss makes $1 billion a year, why is this truly a problem? I mean, you're unequal, but no one's really poor. You have enough money for food and travel and vacations. You don't have a private jet, but we don't want to equalize the market for private jets. It's not like we want everybody to have a private jet, right? And the reason they became so wealthy is because many people like you were driven to a place of non-poverty. Right? They have thousands of employees, hundreds of thousands of employees who all opted into work at this place and make a decent wage that lifted them so far above poverty that their lives are better off. And if the trade-off is that then the CEO type has a couple $1 billion and 10 private yachts or whatever, that's still fine, because we do have a problem with poverty, but why really with inequality?
So, I mean, poverty versus inequality, I feel in this situation is again kind of just splitting hairs, because there is a vast gap, and we do see that this whole trickle-down theory doesn't really work. It hasn't worked, okay? It hasn't. Yes, in some way there is a general upliftment, but that would happen with the growth and development of any society. But we know that just because some people are really powerful and they have a lot of money, society in general has not benefited from that, right? Just because Bill Gates is donating a lot of his money to fund public health, that's not to say that is the best utilization of that money, because he still has the ability to decide where that money goes. And in general, I would prefer that money, the allocation of those resources was up to the hands of someone who had some accountability, like the government subject to a democracy, right? Versus a private player who can, spend billions on things that really, when you could maybe spend on more important things like education and public health, you're spending on things that this person thinks is important, but may not be important for all of us, right? So I do feel that yes, poverty is more important than inequality, but I think that with inequality there will generally be some level of misallocation of resources, or inefficient allocation of resources. I feel that, and that's obviously, even if you look at the theory, right? Perfect competition, most efficient, monopoly not, right? It's not efficient because the incentives are not there, right? When you don't have money, you are much more incentivized to use it more efficiently. When you have a lot of money, you will not. So even economic theory tells us that.
Right. Yeah. Yes. It's so strange to me because if I was sitting across the table from like a classic libertarian voice, they would be saying the worst place to put your money is the state. The state is inefficient. They do not have the right incentives to solve meaningful problems. Bill Gates has done more to eradicate malaria than all the African nations combined, and all the billions of dollars that they raised to eradicate poverty, eradicate malaria. And that's because Bill Gates is spending his own money, is thinking very meaningfully through what the highest impact of his dollar is, and then putting it there. And of course, no coercion involved, right? It's of his own volition that he chooses to give up this capital. And I mean, I can see that being true. Like I can see obviously states are inefficient, and because they have a heavy bureaucracy and no real good incentive structure to do great work. A lot of these, I mean, when you speak about corporate entrenchment, it's also true for bureaucratic entrenchment, that a lot of these people are just career bureaucrats and sit there forever. And so it's like a parallel conversation, like the other side would say same words, just like replace some keywords. But I hear you, like you're saying that it's not like we voted on malaria being the problem to be solved. Bill Gates has a couple $1 billion and then he picks what he should solve. But it is his money, and that's
yes,
yeah.
And it is his money that he got from having power in markets, right?
Yeah.
Like, and that is extractive.
And here, just to try and complete that sentence, so I may want to say that he got from competing in markets fairly, right? Like he competed fairly and won fair and square, right? Like
which he didn't, but
yeah, which I mean, of course, like I understand that. Like I'm just erecting this as an argument, but you're going to say he didn't compete fairly, right? And the unfairness was that he raised a lot of money, then drove down prices, killed competition or bought them out, and then effectively monopolized the market to have them consume his product.
Correct.
Right? And that's the unfair bit. But
multiple practices across different things. Yeah.
But one of the things that Bill Gates never did was jack up prices, like for consumers. Right? Like consumers never had to. I mean, I don't know when the last time you paid for a spreadsheet software is, but by and large consumers are just not paid for many other things that instead who has paid are, like you said, the developer side. I don't know, I feel like if you polled the world population, or do you feel exploited by Microsoft, the answer would just be like, no, actually I don't feel like I was exploited. I'm actually quite happy that I got like an operating system and a laptop that I could work on, and I got so much productive work done as a consequence of it. I go to college and take notes and read books and do all of this on my computer. That wouldn't have happened without that. I don't know. So the reason I started off with the divorcing political power from economic power is I don't know if the consensus that exists in the political domain, which is it is a problem that Elon Musk could have a say in what happens without being elected. Right? There seems to be broad consensus there. Like this could be a problematic area. We have an Adani and Adani problem, whatever. Right? These are all true. I don't know that consensus translates to the economic front. If devoid of political power, you simply had a capitalist who was making a lot of money, and of course, paying wages, selling products that people actually wanted. I do want a laptop. Now I have a laptop. Thank God I have a laptop. Right? I don't have to manufacture it myself. Just double thank you, win-win situations. I am not sure if that consensus will carry through.
You could be in a market where you would pay even less, get an even better laptop, get many more things, get a whole different way of computing, live a very different life. But this company is directing your life by removing choices, by kind of strategically maneuvering around how the tech should be, what kind of products you should consume, how you should consume them, when you should consume them, the entire ad-driven business model, which kind of drives our entire life, right? So it's not even about what we're consuming. It's about the ways in which we are being directed to do things.
But do you feel like in that world, prices would be higher? Because more competition means less efficiency. In that I won't be able to manufacture 1 million pieces of a laptop. I have to manufacture 100,000. So my ability to negotiate prices will drop by 10x. So all laptops will be just like 10% more expensive, right? Obviously, because I don't have a larger market to sate, since I'm in a highly competitive market, the price for the consumer will start going up. Is that true, do you feel?
So economies of scale definitely operate in some industries, but I don't think operate to that extent in the computer manufacturing space, because I mean, of course you have economies of scale, but when you have power, you will obviously increase prices. So even if you're producing at a lower cost, is the consumer getting the benefit of that? It's not, because you don't have the incentive to charge a lower price.
Oh, but because I have to hold on to monopoly, I will actually drop prices even more and then do things like ecosystem, garden, buy my, etc.
Price is not the issue in a lot of tech markets, right? And we talked about, maybe we talk about other markets, but in tech, the extraction is happening in subtler ways, and we don't fully understand it, and we're not told about it. So that is also like worrying for me, that our lives are being directed without us really knowing it. At least so I teach competition on digital markets, and my students, who are obviously consumers of tech and know tech, they are wide-eyed. They're like, is this really what is happening? And then they go back and they think about it. Even though they are consumers of these products and they're so savvy, they don't really understand what comes with consuming tech products. And that's an obfuscation that suits monopolies, right? Why would they share information that will not help them sell products?
Yeah, I hear you. Okay, then we can take a quick leap to non-digital markets. We spoke about the medical space in general, and this has come up in like a bunch of previous podcasts. I think it's like a really interesting exception case, because most people seem to agree that you should grant patents. Like a big pharma company makes a drug, they have no incentive to go after making the drug if there is no patent granted at the end of that whole R&D process, because this is in the billions of dollars. And on the other side, of course, if they have a patent, they have a monopoly, a state-granted, state-sanctioned monopoly, and unilateral decision-making authority on what pricing should be. Individuals who suffer from those conditions, chronic or otherwise, but niche conditions, and in a medical market, I feel like even if it's like 1 in a million or 2 in a million people, that's still like millions and millions of people across the entire world who suffer from these specific ailments. Then the cost of drugs is high, and lives are lost, or at least quality of life in many cases is diminished because the drug is too expensive to afford. And would love to understand your take. I mean, one way to go about this is, screw patents. Like that's the problem. The problem is the patent. We want this to be competitive. We want other people to copy these drugs. Versus like price controls, which is if we give out a patent, then should we control the prices as well and force them to sell at a certain price, which removes a lot of decision-making authority from the entity. Ultimately, they're still private companies, and they've embarked on this mission to make money. And the more you curtail that, the less likely they are to keep in this business. Then they will just move and build a bank instead or something, right? Like the best entrepreneurs want to go to places where they can make the most money, and you'll have worse entrepreneurs solving for these difficult problems, which means the problems take longer to solve. If we want a cure for cancer, the ideal way is to like give the person who cures some cancer like $1 gazillion, right? And suddenly you'll have everybody throwing themselves at solving cancer because I can make $1 gazillion.
Okay, so I disagree with you there.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, so I'm handing the ball over to you, right? In this sort of medical space, specifically with like intellectual property and the profit incentive, how would you look at it from your point of view?
And we can, obviously I interrupted you.
Of course, yeah.
But on the profit incentive, right? Because also like my PhD was all about why do businesses really have profit incentives?
Oh yeah, you spoke about are they rational?
Yeah, which we know that the profit is not the only thing that motivates businesses. Businesses are after all driven by human beings, and human beings are motivated in a lot of different ways.
I agree.
So I feel that capitalism kind of builds into this profit incentive, and I think we as a society need to kind of shift away from that. So I feel like a lot of really exciting science happens in universities. All the Nobel Prize winners create these like amazing innovations, and they are not getting billions of dollars, right? So I think innovation is a pretty complex concept that we don't understand fully, and we need to. I think it's too simplistic to say that you need to throw money at it. Right? I think in your previous podcast as well, like these discussions have come up. I think they've been very interesting discussions. So I think that you can do many things just by not throwing money at it. Like you can approach it in a number of different ways. So I'm not fully convinced that if there's no money in it, it won't happen, or it won't happen as well. I think other incentives and motivations can be equally, if not more powerful, right? You can be driven by a passion to save the world and do it.
Yeah, I'm sorry to cut you off. I agree with you. Most of the entrepreneurs I love are people who've gone after hard problems because they just care about the space. There's not even an iota of an idea on how they will monetize this. That's not even the thought process. I want to clean up the air. I want to clean up water. I want to solve a disease. Right? Whatever these are, these motivations come from deep within as a consequence of things they've seen, like real suffering they've watched, or just the data that unfolds and says this is a problem that we need to go after. Like
and force people as well.
Yeah, force people to.
No, force the free and open source.
Oh yeah, exactly. Free and open source, absolutely great example, right? Like I know someone who's trying to solve tuberculosis. There's no reason apart from the fact that tuberculosis kills more people than like 8 to 10 other top diseases combined, right? And it has no right to exist in 2025 because we already know how to cure this. It's just that the solutions exist where the problem does not exist where the problem exists, right? So the US has solved it, but India hasn't, and it's a mismatch. I get that. I get why people go after like that. We build because we care. Right? I feel like there's a tipping point. So the innovative bit to get to a solution does happen at universities. You get, for example, CRISPR gets made as a technology. You've arrived that far. Then you have this question of how do we commercialize this technology? Because at that point you have to spend a lot of money to put this into production, manufacturing, whatever, developers, shipping, all of that. And the minute that question comes in, then you have a pricing question. And then you say something like, okay, we've built version 1.0, but we know what version 2.0 looks like, and 3.0 and 4.0. Then we need like so many billions of dollars to do R&D. And then, okay, then we have to price it at such a price so that a little bit of money from every tablet sold, right, or every unit sold goes back into an R&D pool so that we can pay people to go and do the research that they require to do. And in a matter of a few years, what you have is a corporation. You have business folks who've been brought in to look at the supply side, negotiate prices, look at the demand side, set prices. You can't give this to everybody because then we can't do more innovation and we can't keep like building better drugs. So you may have really motivated people at the helm who want to solve the problem at its core, but eventually distribution is a function of business and business is a function of profit making. Sans which you may not be even able to solve the thing that you set out to solve. And so of course I agree with you, but I think it eventually boils down to a bottom line. At some point all businesses turn into real businesses where they start saying, yeah, we need to figure out how we make profits. Then you need money, so you go to an investor, but the investor only give you money if you deliver a return. The return is shareholder value which needs to be maximized. So you need to do that. To do that, you need to pay dividends or rebuy equity, those sorts of things. All of this boils down to having a bottom line. So I agree with you. Of course, I feel like 0 to 1 happens in universities, but 1 to 100 may just need like this capitalist enterprise.
Do you need IP for that? Like, do you need IP protection for all of that to happen?
Are you asking me privately?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this has been one I've struggled with on previous podcasts. But in the position of this podcast, like because I'm taking a more liberal position, I think that no, actually, the state shouldn't have to stand up and say that I'm going to erect patents in your favor. Defensibility is a problem you must solve. Right? Let's say I believe in this. Now, as a lawyer yourself, obviously, when you went through college, you studied IP law. Right? This is a large part of what lawyers study for sure. No, am I wrong?
I mean, it's one course, but I think in some places it's even an elective. I'm not sure, but yeah, I did study IP law.
All the lawyers I know have just like gone off to file trademarks for people. Like they all just do IP stuff. Anyway, the question is, do we kill the incentive? And is this property? That's also a good one, because I feel like private property needs to be defended. You can't come and steal my house. So how can you come and steal my design? We've created this category of property called intellectual property. And if the state protects private property, physical property, should they also protect intellectual property? but then they grant a monopoly. So I want to bring that puzzle to you actually. I mean, this feels, I can see both sides of an argument here. So what do you think is a way to handle the pharma industry and monopolies that arise there?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question, because also I think you had this entire discussion around what does property mean in a previous podcast. And obviously this is a right that is being granted by the state, which if the state didn't grant, you wouldn't have it, right? So in that sense, I'm just struggling with because obviously I'm anti-IP because that grants a monopoly, but I do see the other side, which is the innovation, and where competition law steps in is when you exploit that monopoly position. But I think I'm fundamentally of the view that a lot of entrenched monopolies will exploit their position. That's just the inherent nature of a monopoly, that you will exploit your position, right? So therefore, we need to think very carefully about whether we should grant rights that can lead to that happening or not. And so obviously the question is whether we will ever get to develop those products absent the IP, right? Because obviously the state is not doing this. And I think we have to find some middle ground, right? Like, that's what I think you're also, in your previous podcast, have come to that conclusion. There has to be some...
Yeah, but I can't think of a middle ground. I mean, it could be my lack of, creative ability. But if the middle ground ultimately is price control, that seems like it, right? Like lots of people just seem to agree that the way to do it is grant the patent and then control prices. Price controls have lots of unintended consequences because price is an outcome of a market. We don't decide price going in. The market tells us what the price of a product is based on how buyers and sellers are valuing a product. So there is no way we can high modernize, like top down.
But how is that market functioning when there's only one seller and it's determining the price? How is that the outcome of a market?
But if the seller is selling at $1 million and only 5 people a year are buying it, it still doesn't make sense for the seller. Even in a monopolized market, there has to be a negotiated price. There is a cost at which a person will say, I'd rather die or I'd rather be sick than buy this drug. I know it sounds horrible, but there is a price. At some point, there's not enough money in the bank for me to do this. It's also true in healthcare today, right? Like there's a point at which you're going to say, okay, this is a family member, but we do not have the money to be able to support them anymore. And I
was telling you about the price of these gene therapy drugs, right? Which are like 16 crores, 30 crores for one dose, right? Which would seem like no one would price at that level because it just seems like you're cutting your market really small. But it's happening. I'm not really sure what the economics behind that is or what the business rationale behind that is. I think it is based on the insurance funded model that insurance will fund this for a bunch of people, so they will have some kind of a market. But I don't think that the market mechanism is really working here in the way that I see it to work.
So what's really interesting is the insurance example is perfect. The insurance example is an example of a working market, because now you have a problem. A problem is something like this, companies spend billions of dollars making a drug and they seem to be able to only price it at 30 crores for the drug. And it may genuinely be the cost. It may be so that they have to set up a whole manufacturing facility to sell these drugs. There are not so many people who have this illness, or not so many people are willing to buy and pay. We can't sell it at 100 rupees for various cost constraint reasons. We still have to make money at the end of the day or break even. And so it could so be that the real price of this drug is like 10 crores, 15 crores, 30 crores, whatever. And almost impossible to sell, but for the innovation of insurance. And thank God for that, right? Thank God for insurance companies who step in the middle and say, we're going to distribute risk. And so multiple people pay us a premium. Not all of them fall sick, but when some of them fall sick, we have enough money plus a bottom line to be able to pay the manufacturer 15 crores to get a drug. So insurance is an example of a good solution to a problem like this, where it's expensive to make the drug, but somebody steps in the middle and says, I'll negotiate this in such a way that people can actually afford it. So you pay a small premium, but still get an expensive drug, and somebody else has offset the risk because they volunteered to be insured as well.
I still don't see that as an efficiency enhancing outcome, right? So if you sold more units of that drug, you would benefit from economies of scale. You're restricting your market by really increasing the price, and the reason you're able to do that is because it's highly inelastic, right? People will be willing to pay anything, and so you're taking advantage of that, because what is what price can you put on your life? So you can put a very high price on life, and you're taking advantage of that. So I still think that outcome is not the best outcome, because a lot of people, you could expand your market by selling more quantities. I also don't fully understand this, because also the insurance provision will not work in a market like India. Indian insurers will not provide for such expensive drugs.
Oh yeah, sure, yeah, but it's a matter of time, I think. I mean, the more such drugs become available, the more they will seep into insurance plans. The top 1% will likely buy them first, and it'll slowly trickle down from there. I mean, just like I don't know, computers were only owned by really rich people, but today it is ubiquitous. So at some point, this becomes more commoditized.
Yeah.
As a final question here, do you feel like if the company that was charging these exorbitant rates for medicines and hence denying access to lots of folks who couldn't pay and afford those rates, put this money back into building more life-saving medication, right? So went after larger problems, diseases that affected millions of people. God, if they could cure the common cold forever, right? Like we'd never catch the flu. Everyone would want that as a solution. Is that justifiable? And I'm just making a mathematical question. Is there a way to compute this? So in hindsight, we can. In the long arc of things, we can look back and say, yeah, it was actually good for some people to have been unable to afford the drug, because then millions later were able to get a different solution for disease that affected them. And if the math is not computable, if you have a knowledge problem, then maybe it's best to let the market be and not have a regulator step in.
That's a very complex question, right? It's that whole thing that you also talked about, like the life of one person versus the life of many people, right?
Yeah.
You're killing some people, but also for me the thing is like I mean, if I don't think most pharma companies are really investing in such an efficient way the extra money that they're making into the creation of new and innovative products, because a lot of that innovation is happening at the ground level. The pharma company is coming in later. So in that sense, I don't think the utilization of resources is that efficient to justify this, in my view. But also, as a person living with the rare disease, I think I'm biased on this.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I mean, and also valuable to hear your voice on this, because clearly there is a perspective here that you have spent some time considering as a consequence of having to consider it. Versus like most folks who don't have to. We only have to contend with this in that instance where it crops up, which for most lives lived never even comes up.
I think the perspective changes drastically.
Yeah, where you stand depends on where you sit. Awesome. And a final question, then we can sort of like wrap up. I think I've taken up a lot of your time. Is monopolies eventually erode, right? What you're speaking about in terms of like gradualism standpoint. I get it. They may have a monopolized position for 20 years, but eventually they die. Like we agree on this, that no one can hold a monopolized position forever. They will get outcompeted in some way or the other. There are always cracks for entrepreneurship to seep in through. But regulations rarely die. Like once you regulate a market, I mean, we don't use sunset clauses by and large when we regulate. So there's no way for it to naturally go out of fashion. Rarely do politicians or decision makers sit down on laws already passed and revisit them. There's always going to be somebody who says, no, don't take this away because I have a disproportionate benefit. Even if they're a very small percentage of the population, a few voices are enough to keep regulation as they stand. And the political incentive always is to do new and fresh things, not go back and undo previous things that have been done, especially if they're viewed as for the general good or the public good. Right? But at some point, we have to deregulate. I mean, we can't consistently keep passing regulations forever. And so the question is something like, given that monopolies eventually erode, but regulations rarely do, is it not better not to regulate?
I don't agree with you on
the lack of erosion in regulations.
Yes. Also, I mean, there are monopolies like Standard Oil that are like more than 100 years old, and very few laws are that old, right? So there are monopolies that have existed for a long time. But yeah, I do broadly agree that most monopolies die. But yeah, so for instance, competition law is very ex post facto enforcement, right? So it's not like it's a set of laws, it's a case-by-case approach, right? So you look at that, you look at that market, you see if it's anti-competitive, and then you enforce. So I think also does not your thing fully doesn't apply to
I hear you.
competition law as a regulation. And I also think that regulations do go through phases of change. For instance, you have a lot of regulations that govern sectors. If the sector is no longer sort of existing in the same way, if the companies don't exist in the same way, then that regulation kind of withers away as well.
We spoke about the USB Type-C example, right? So, given that has happened, I don't know anybody who's building a new cable standard, because we now have a ubiquitous cable standard, at least in the EU, let's say. Okay. So, one, there's no innovation in the space. But two, when do you think the EU regulators sit down the next time and say, okay, from tomorrow onwards, we are no longer mandating Type-C as the new cable of choice for electronic devices?
A lot of these are built into the laws, right?
Okay, yeah.
Like review periods, like at least for like some of these like laws that govern tech markets, they do build it into the laws. When it comes to sort of regulating monopolies, the monopoly itself may be revisited. Is this still a monopoly? So for instance, your Digital Markets Act in Europe, they will review the status of that entity as a gatekeeper regularly. And they could determine that this entity no longer has that kind of power, so we will not regulate them. And I think that if Apple is not in that position, then I think that that USB cable thing will be revisited. But
Got it. Understood. Yeah, I think that's a good answer. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, and I've certainly not read the regulations. So what you're saying sounds logical. Like, I'm sure somebody else there asked the same question, and the answer has certainly been answered, and there must be some reasonable.
But on the
clause.
on the broader point of your question, right? Like, I mean that's the point where I'm willing to concede a bit, in the sense that I get it that beyond a certain point, the regulation of USB cables might be pointless. And at that point, it might do harm. But I think it's still better to build into the law the ability to revisit it. And maybe that is something that, again, as a democracy, we can ask for to happen. And it does happen, because almost for every law, there is a consultation. And you can have a say in what that law ultimately sort of says. So in India, we had the draft digital competition bill, which has been shelved because no one liked it, except me, maybe. So.
Yes, I hear you. Again, for a monoclassical type, it would be so absurd to even think about the state spending a single minute of its time discussing cable types. But I think this conversation has been like generally helpful to make the case for what the other side looks like. Like, what is the case for antitrust, right? I don't know if you feel like it, but I think we covered a lot of ground, and a lot of interesting things have come up.
So how much did you kind of agree with me?
No, so on the podcast, I have no private, like I don't talk about what my private positions are at all, right? It just helps me across the board be neutral with guests. It's the similar tone across the board. But usually,
how much were you convinced by?
Yeah, so usually on most podcasts now, and I think I want to start writing about this. There's always one thing that a guest says that I feel like, that's actually reasonable. Like on the first podcast with Manoj, he said AI art is not art, right? Like, it is not in the category of art. And before that, I didn't agree with him, but post that I did. And for every subsequent episode, I've had something that's sort of like moved my mind a little bit. So this has had a few of those, but not to be discussed on the podcast, because I'm straitjacket bound to disagree with you at all times.
Okay.
But I want to flip the script as like a parting note. I usually ask guests to step into my shoes. So if you had to do a disagrees, right? Shilpi disagrees, and I'm somebody who holds your current point of view, which is that monopolies are bad, competition good, state must intervene, regulation is helpful, case-by-case basis analysis is valuable, all of that. And you had to do the opposing side. What is the best case argument for why monopolies are not a problem and the state must just leave markets be and not interfere?
So I think if monopolies are purely a result of superior performance, and I don't know if this is going to meet, because it's quite a narrow thing that I'm saying. So if it is purely a result of superior performance, it's a reward from the market for doing your job really well, then I think those monopolies should not be regulated. If every monopoly was like that, I would be happy not to regulate it. But also I do partially think that the argument that no monopoly is permanent, kind of, to me, that is the only thing that I kind of feel works, because there will be some disciplining from market forces. I really believe in market forces, right? I do believe that the market, when it's working well, delivers. If the monopoly is working in that kind of a market, then go for it. Like,
Yeah.
that's what I would say.
Yeah, and I feel state, at least like where you and the libertarian agrees that the state shouldn't be involved. That is, the state shouldn't be carving out, spaces for businesses to go and monopolize the market. Yeah, so in those cases, perhaps. Yeah, this has been like really fun. Even preparing for this was fun, because I got to read a lot, things that I have not read before. So I'm very grateful for you coming on and having this conversation with me.
I enjoyed it so much. Thank you so much, Deepak. I really had fun.